Thank you very much. At this time, we are going to go ahead and recognize our student board members and ask them for their reports. We are going to start with Ms. Bowling.
Good afternoon. Standard-based grading is implemented at Antioch High School this year.
Let me stop you for a second.
Okay.
I'm doing something a little different. Instead of the students' board members just giving a standard report, I'm asking them to report on specific topics that I believe are important to our students. Ms. Bowling is going to talk about the new grading policy, and Mr. Ayau is going to talk about MLK in 7th and 8th grade issues. So just so you guys don't think they're going off on their own tangent. So I'm sorry, Ms. Bowling, go ahead.
Standard-based grading is implemented at Antioch High School this year. This system is something totally different to students and teachers. In my opinion, this new system is helpful for teachers to understand if students are comprehending in the classroom. The number one burning question teachers want to know is, what are my students actually learning and digesting in my classroom? This system is more based on summative assessments. This actually helps teachers figure out what is it that my students know or do not understand. Also, it helps parents know what standard does my child need assistance with and how can I help as a parent. As I prepared for this report, I wanted some feedback from my peers. One of my peers stated that standard-based grading is good and bad at the same time. It gives students a grade even though they did not do an assignment. Also, at the same time, it tests students based on their understandings. Another peer says she feels like standard-based grading might get the best out of the students that want to score an A, which is quite hard to get, according to most teachers. You must master the work to get an A, which could bring the best out of the students' understanding as well. But at the same time, students get grades for not doing their assignment. Other students feel like standard-based grading is a great idea, but having homework be little to nothing of the overall hurts a lot of people. Also, it makes students slack off, yet pass by putting their act together at the last minute. It's actually too late to enforce the completely new way of grading to students who are used to a different system. If they implement standard-based grading at younger ages, it will have the desirable results since students will use this system this year. Well, I want to thank the people who gave me those great inputs also. In my opinion, I feel like most teachers do not like the grading scale because you have most students who do their work and they feel like giving 50% to those students is not giving them a wake-up call. It's just letting them snooze by in class until the bell rings. Well, as for standard-based grading, it's important to consider the pros and cons that come along. So thank you for this report.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ayau.
Good evening. Giving me the opportunity to voice my opinion on the MLK pathway proposal. This is my royal family too, and I'm glad I have the opportunity to say what I feel regarding the issue. Now, MLK has been my home for almost 5 years now, and after this school year, I'll be taking on my senior year of high school. This means that I, like many other students, went ahead in the 5th and 6th grade and started going to MLK in the 7th grade. It wasn't an easy transition, believe me, but it was well worth it. Going to MLK as a 7th grader has given me many skills that I don't think I could have gotten at any other school. And that being said, I am in favor of keeping the 7th and 8th grade in MLK. Having middle school in MLK is just one of the things that makes it special. And in my opinion, it's one of the reasons as to why MLK is ranked so high among schools in Tennessee. Being at MLK for half of my middle school career was a huge help and prepared me for all the rigorous high school courses. And I'll be completely honest, if I didn't enter MLK as a 7th grader and my only option was to somehow get lucky enough to enter as a 9th grader, my grades wouldn't be nearly as good. When I first heard about this proposal, after one of my teachers told me following a faculty meeting, the first problem that came to my mind was how much of the MLK, Head, and Rose Park community this would affect. I thought of all of the middle schooler teachers that would leave, that would actually lose their jobs just in an instant like that. And I thought of all the Head and Rose Park students that would have to try even harder to enter MLK. If somebody told me while I was a 5th grader at Head that there was a large possibility that I could no longer go to one of the top schools in Tennessee, I would be devastated. And I don't want any middle schoolers at Head or Rose Park to feel that way. But I know that if the middle school is kept in MLK, we're going to have to find an alternative solution to the overcrowding. I've heard the proposal to expand MLK by installing new classrooms where the soccer field currently is, and I'm in full support of that solution. But of course, the biggest concern is the amount of money that it's going to cost the district. Plus, we have to take into account that the repairs that are due for MLK's poor condition are due in the year 2015, which means that even more money will be spent on the building. I'm also in support of other solutions that I've heard, such as changing MLK's location altogether from the historic Pearl High School to a different, bigger, better school building that can hold the amount of students that we have coming in each year. However, at the moment, I think one solution seems to be the best in terms of reducing the amount of overcrowding. And that solution is raising the standards back to what they once were. Each morning on the intercom, our SGA president states the mission statement of MLK, which includes preparing students with proven academic talent. It's evident that the standards for admission into MLK have lowered over the years. So to me and to many others, the best solution to overcrowding would be raising the standards to advanced levels on TCAP and any other requirements required for admission into MLK. With this, MLK wouldn't have to accept as many new students and the population could be kept at a reasonable number. Plus, being such an academically demanding school, it's only reasonable that MLK accepts students with the greatest academic abilities. MLK is one of the best schools in Tennessee for a reason. It's academically talented students. And I believe that without the 7th and 8th grade, MLK could never rise to the level of excellence that it is today. So regardless of what decision is ultimately made, I am sure of something. Speaking for the MLK, Head, and Rose Park communities, we are willing to do whatever it takes to make sure the middle school remains in MLK. If it means implementing any of the possible solutions that I stated before, or any other solutions that will be stated today, or in other previous meetings, we're willing to comply with any proposal as long as it keeps our beloved middle schoolers. And thank you, that's all I have.
Thank you very much. And I must say, I think I like this idea of you guys giving your reports. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. Please be sure that Ms. Bobo or Ms. Hawkins gets a copy of your report. We will move on to awards and recognitions. Dr. Steele.
Good evening, Madam Chair and school board members. It's my pleasure to recognize Meigs Middle School as a National Blue Ribbon School. Meigs Middle Magnet School is one of just 4 schools in Tennessee and 286 nationwide to achieve this great honor from the U.S. Department of Education. It comes because of the heights Meigs students have reached in academic achievements. 92.3 proficient or advanced in math, 95.4 proficient or advanced in reading language arts, 94.8% proficient or advanced in science, and 99.7% advanced or proficient in social studies. The Blue Ribbons Schools program honors public and private schools based on 2 criteria. Schools whose students, regardless of background, achieve in the top 10% of their state on state tests, or in the case of private schools, in the top 10% of the nation on nationally normed tests. And the second criteria is schools with at least 40% of their students from disadvantaged backgrounds that demonstrate dramatic improvement of student performance to high levels on state test or nationally normed test. We're proud of the leadership, the faculty, and the students at Meigs Middle School, at Meigs Middle Magnet, and the parents. So congratulations to Dr. Scott Underwood, who is the principal. Dr. Underwood, if you'll come forward, we have a recognition for you.
And I apologize. I got so excited about our student board members' reports that I totally went past announcements. So we're going to go back to announcements. And we're going to start with Dr. Gentry, Dr. Brannon, Ms. Spearing.
Yes, thank you. This week on Walk to School Day, October 2nd, about 1,000 parents, teachers, children, aunts, and uncles turned out in the rain to walk to school at Dan Mills Elementary. We met at Riverside Church of Christ and walked almost a mile after standing in the rain and waiting for about 30 minutes for everybody to get there. And we walked about a mile in the rain, and the roads were closed, and there was a sea of umbrellas as far as the eye could see. And as many happy kids tried to be sure that they did not miss one mud puddle. After we arrived at school, the mayor addressed the group and reminded the kids how important it is to read for pleasure every day, a message we both embrace. After the assembly, I had the pleasure of a guided tour at Dan Mills by Principal Patty Yon. The climate of learning and respect is palatable at Dan Mills, and it starts with Patty. It's felt by the teachers, and it's transferred to each and every student. I've thought a lot about the characteristics of good leadership since that day, and I think we can learn from the leadership of Patty Yon and replicate it in areas where we most need improvement. On October 24th, Dan Mills is hosting a Dragon Jubilee and Carnival from 5 to 7:30. There will be games, food, prizes, bake sale, horse rides. It's $10 admission for kids, $5 for dinner, and this will benefit Dan Mills PTO. And I read last week to two classes, Miss Hill and Miss Parrish's first grade classrooms at Chadwell Elementary. And Jay, when I walked into the building, I saw that they were studying alliteration. As it turned out, there was alliteration in the book that I was reading. So I was able to draw on that. So it was helpful to have that standard out so that I could use that in my work with the kids. And I just wanted to share the letter of appreciation from the kids at Chadwell Elementary. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kim. Ms. Shepherd.
Do you have a couple? The McGavitt Cluster Coalition won a Star Award, appropriately named for Star Herman for their work in the Last Dollar Scholarship, beginning with the graduates of 2014, so next year. I was honored to represent this active group of volunteers at a luncheon to accept this award. And last Wednesday through Friday, Metro Nashville Public Schools hosted over 150 visitors from several states across the country, visiting a few of our high schools to learn more about the academy model that MNPS has perfected so well. The schools that were visited were McGavick High School, Antioch, Cane Ridge, and Hillwood. And during the roll-like session on Friday afternoon, I heard from many of these visitors very positive comments about their visits to the schools. And I want to thank everyone that made that happen, the Ford Hub Foundation, Pencil Foundation, the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce, Star Herman, Dr. Steele, Dr. Register. It was a great visit, and everybody had very positive comments about our high schools. And last but definitely not least, a very special person to all of us is celebrating a birthday tomorrow, and I want to wish Miss Bisha Hawkins happy birthday tomorrow. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Shepherd. Ha ha. Mr. Hayes. Ms. Frogue.
I have one announcement. I recently was invited to speak at an event sponsored by NOAA, which is the Nashville, which is an organization entitled Nashville Organized for Action and Hope. And this organization seeks to promote healthy growth in our city by reducing inequality. I learned at the event that in the last 10 years, the Nashville area economy has grown by 58%. But at the same time, the proportion of the Nashville population living in poverty has increased by 42%. And I think it was a very enlightening the event. Had a lot of interesting speakers, but I think that these numbers have a profound impact on our schools. And I think that we all have to come together as a community to address the problem. And I'm hopeful that NOAA will be able to make an impact by highlighting the issue. And I was very honored to be part of their event.
Thank you. And I just have a couple of events. One from Mr. Pinkston. The School Board's Budget and Finance Committee will meet for a joint work session with our colleagues on the Metro Council's Budget and Finance and Education Committees on Thursday, October 17th at 3:30 p.m. to continue discussions about the MNPS budget as we look ahead to the 2014-15 operating year. This meeting will be held at the Martin Center for Professional Development, 2400 Fairfax Avenue. And from Mr. Pinkston, as always, the public is invited to attend. So a couple of other quick announcements, really great things. Just found out this week that McGavock High School will be performing at the TSBA Annual Conference, yay, McGavock, on Sunday, November 10th at 5 p.m. I really would love for all board members to be there for that event. If you have not registered, please make sure you get registered for that event. And also, very exciting information, the NSBA Annual Conference, that's the National School Boards Association Annual Conference, will be held in Nashville in 2015. What a way to highlight our district. Is that not going to be an awesome event? So just a couple of announcements there, so I'm looking forward to that as well, and more information to come on that. So we will go ahead and move into public participation. The board will hear from those persons who have requested to appear at this board meeting. In the interest of time, speakers are requested to limit remarks to 3 minutes or less. Comments will be timed, and once you hear the timer, please end your conversation or end your comments and return to your seat. We have quite a few people listed on the agenda tonight. Board members will not immediately respond to speakers during the public comment period, but may follow up after the meeting. As I call your name, please come to the mic or be prepared to come to the mic. Are you Mr. Moth?
I am.
Hello, Mr. Moth.
Good evening.
After Mr. Moth, we have Tallulah Crowley-Chenault. So please be ready after Mr. Moth. Go right ahead. Thank you.
Indeed, I'm Chris Moth. My son is an 8th grader at a neighborhood middle school. And I'm here to thank you and Nashville's taxpayers for making our journey possible. The new middle school strategic plan is exactly the right next step for Nashville. Your plan sets academic achievement as a primary goal, with high school courses offered to our 7th and 8th graders across town. More importantly, the plan acknowledges the needs of the whole child. Every child needs stable relationships with adult mentors, extracurricular activities, the arts, and music. Your plan delivers. While I'm sold on the plan, I worry about the rest of Nashville. Your plan describes cohesive learning communities, families, and mentors integrated into the fabric of our middle schools. But how can we truly have cohesive learning communities when we demand that bright lottery winners leave our zone middle schools? I accept your wisdom that picking high schools for our children is best done in 4th grade, from 3rd grade TCAP scores and a roll of the dice. I accept that. But what I don't grasp is why our college-bound 4th graders must leave our zone middle schools to stay on a high school pathway. I once heard that the MEGS pathway helps us combat flight, but through our phone survey of every family at J.T. Moore, we learned that families are not leaving us much out of academic concerns. Neither do families flee because we have more free lunch, ESL, or special needs students than at MEGS. Rather, many families leave simply because your pathway policies mandate their departure. So this evening, my little idea is that we should allow lottery winners to attend zone middle schools, if they so choose. It's a tiny tweak. You might not even have 100 takers. It won't impact our high school populations and might improve middle school diversity. More importantly, allowing winners to attend our zone schools will tell Nashville that you believe in the quality of your zone middle schools and that you believe in that quality without reservation. Too many folks tell us to fix our schools by closing them. When we proclaim instead that an advanced score at Lytton or Oliver is just as good as an advance from Head or MEGS, we take a giant leap out of the 1990s and we shatter some deeply held misconceptions around this town. I'll close with a quick word on MLK. It is 2013. We must not make decisions based on vague appeals to tradition. Rather, we must ground our decisions in data. Your score data tell us clearly that 8th grade advanced students from Rose Park do just as well as 8th graders who come in, as the 6th graders who come into MLK through Head. Your data tell us to spare the soccer field at MLK and that no child will suffer academically when you recast MLK as a high school. Dr. Register's initial proposal adds 400 more seats in 9th through 12th for all our kids across town at zero cost. It's the best path forward. However you decide on MLK, I urge you to simultaneously create a committee to consider letting our Winnie kids attend zone middle schools. I have a hunch Council Lady Evans might want to chair that committee. Thanks for listening. I'm leaving 20 copies of the J.T. Moore phone survey at the podium, and I direct your attention to question number 10. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moth. Ms. Chenault?
Good evening. I'm Tallulah Crawley Chenault, Education Committee Chair for the Nashville Branch NAACP. At issue is the September 13th news article in the Tennessean entitled, "Some Nashville Schools Could Close to Avoid Deficit." Many in the African American community and beyond are concerned about school closings, while seemingly charter schools have been given the okay to expand at will. Despite the fact that a significant number of African American children attend charter schools and traditional public schools, the African American community has surprisingly remained silent on this issue. The apparent impact of more charter schools without serious study falls on schools in poor and minority communities. Somebody has to pay the bill, I guess. Why not those who make the least amount of noise? On behalf of concerned Nashvillians regarding school closings in their community and their right to have their voices heard, I ask our elected school board members and Dr. Register to meet in an open forum to have ongoing dialogue with each community whose school has been considered for closing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chenault. Representative Brenda Gilmore.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair Lady, and to the other school board representatives, Dr. Register. I'm Brenda Gilmore, and I'm very pleased to be here in support of Metro schools, both the success stories that we hear so much about, as well as the schools that I want to speak in favor of trying to make some of the schools stronger and strengthen them so that all children will have an equal opportunity of success. The list that I read of schools being closed were Rosebank, Inglewood, Robert E. Lillard, Haynes, Graymar, Isaac Litton, Jerry Baxter, Bailey, McKissick Middle Schools, Whites Creek, Maplewood, and Stratford High School. And I believe that all those schools are in the northern quadrant of the county. And so I would just like to ask you to think long and hard before you close all of those schools which reside in the northern part of Davidson County, as if you do that, it will completely eliminate the concept of neighborhood schools for African American children. And they will even have to be bused further than some of them already are being bused to attend those schools. I would like to ask you to think of putting more resources in those schools and making those traditional schools stronger and better so that the students can graduate and grow on to make a contribution to society. Especially I want to speak in favor of, I probably heard more from parents at Haynes asking that that particular school not be closed. But again, I want to ask that all of them not be closed. While I'm standing, I also want to say that I speak in favor of Martin Luther King, or MLK, and asking that that school also, that we not take the recommendation of eliminating pathways into that school of 7th and 8th and let that school remain 7th, 8th, as well as continuing through its high school. This is a school that is known countrywide in this United States. It's in the top 100. So let's try to find another school and make it strong so the other students can have an equal opportunity of graduating from a strong school like Martin Luther King. Rather than tampering with a model that is working extremely well, let's make all of our schools like Martin Luther King. So thank you very much for letting me have an opportunity to have my say. Thank you.
Thank you. Reverend Olivia Cloud.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to address you. I've asked Dr. LaMonica Stewart to join me here. Together, we represent 2 chapters in Nashville of Delta Sigma Theta sorority. And Delta Sigma Theta, one of our hallmarks is scholarship. So in our membership, together we represent over 700 women in Nashville. And of those 700, probably about 40% are educators, counselors, in some way are impacted by the education system. And many of our members include such esteemed members as Dr. L. Dorothy Wright, Dr. Julie Williams, and Dr. Carolyn Baldwin Tucker. We are elementary school teachers, middle and high school teachers, guidance counselors, but we're also mothers, aunts, sisters, and neighbors who are concerned about the schools of North Nashville. So I'm here today and ask Dr. Stewart to stand here with me just to ask you to consider more than what is expedient, but what is best for the health, well-being, and esteem of the families of North Nashville. Closing schools in this area, great schools like Haynes, sends a message that good things only happen in other neighborhoods and not in our neighborhood. And so on behalf of the women of Delta Sigma Theta, I ask you to consider what is just and not just what is expedient. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Lorraine Green? Okay, thank you. Beverly Glaze Johnson.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm happy to be here today. Again, my name is Beverly Glaze Johnson, and I serve as the chair of Social Action, Nashville Metropolitan Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Additionally, I'm a parent of an MNPS graduate, a grandparent of students currently in the system, and I am also a proud graduate myself of within Davidson County Public Schools. My comments will be brief. I've read over the last several weeks via the local news outlets about the proposal to eliminate the pathway of students attending Rose Park and head middle to MLK. I know you've cited overcrowding as a major concern, and clearly I do understand. But I would ask you to please consider the overall and long-term impact, given many of these students come from moderate to low-income families whose futures and tickets to college and universities are dependent on scholarships. And as we all know, students with the highest academic scores and attending top-rated schools are often offered scholarships first. Many parents desire and need the tuition assistance because without this opportunity, for many, higher education will be no more than a dream. Please consider in making that decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Victoria Powell?
Hi, good afternoon, Dr. Register and school board members. I have a 9th grader at MLK, and first off, I just want to thank Dr. Register and your team for taking the time out of your busy schedules to meet and listen to the head and MLK parents over the past few weeks. We thank you for listening carefully to all the reasons why a 7th through 12th grade school design has helped MLK become a top 100 nationally recognized high school. And at the same time, we at MLK are proud that we have maintained a level of diversity unrealized in many other top schools. We applaud Dr. Register for taking a bold first step last Monday when he put forth a new proposal in front of the Metro Council Education Committee advocating expanding capacity at MLK, but it is exactly that, a bold first step. Much work in planning, feasibility studies, and design needs to be done if we are serious about expansion in the historic Pearl High School site that MLK occupies today. Before we talk about the future, however, I do want to spend a minute or two talking about the past and how we got to where we are today. The 3 current academic magnet schools in Nashville, HUMFOG, MEGS, and MLK, I believe, were formed in the 1980s due to desegregation court orders. The schools were designed to attract a cross-section of academically able students from all racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic groups across Davidson County. And these academic magnet schools have been highly successful in providing access and opening the doors of opportunity and providing thousands of diverse students for college and beyond. I think it remains just as important today as it did in the 1980s that we find ways to provide equal access and opportunity to these minority students, especially those who have the academic capabilities and will benefit greatly from an academic magnet program. So there are many ways to approach the idea of expansion, and of course, we are all in full support of adding a new building on the current soccer field at MLK, but here is another idea to consider. Perhaps open up a third academic magnet high school in one of the high school facilities that is currently on your closing list. Perhaps by opening up a third new academic magnet, you save money by using an existing asset, you help the North Nashville neighborhoods that the school is in, you open up more academic magnet spots and choices for parents, and you also perhaps give one of the current feeder schools, Rose Park, a proper academic high school to feed into. It could be a win-win-win for many reasons. And so again, we just want to thank you for your willingness to find lots of ways to solve the MLK overcrowding problem. There are also lots of other short-term fixes that you have heard from parents already regarding examining current pathways and standards. And we also hope you will consider those at the same time that you pursue the addition of more space for the MLK building. In the end, we need a comprehensive approach that will help us get to a sustainable long-term solution. Thank you.
Dr. LaMonica Stewart.
Good evening. Again, my name is Dr. LaMonica Stewart, and I serve as the president of the Nashville Metropolitan Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. And I'm here along with our sister chapter and their president, Sarah Olivia Cloud from the Nashville Alumni Chapter, to show our support of Metro Public Schools and to express our concern about two issues. The first issue is a proposal to eliminate 7th and 8th grades from MLK Magnet School. We understand that overcrowding at MLK is a serious issue that must be addressed. However, we do not believe that the best way to solve that issue is to remove 7th and 8th grade from MLK or to reduce the pathway for students from Head and Rose Park middle schools into this outstanding school. We know that middle and high school education play a critical role in preparing students for success in college and postgraduate study. And at all educational levels, students excel in strong, supportive environments that inspire them, challenge them, and stretch them academically. Such an environment exists at MLK. Consequently, we believe that every opportunity should be provided for top students, including those in the North Nashville area at Head and Rose Park middle schools, to attend MLK. We support the idea of expanding capacity at MLK and other proposals that will allow eligible students from North Nashville and across the city to benefit from the excellent teaching staff and academic rigor provided at the school. Our second area of concern is the proposal to close Haynes Middle Health Science, Medical Science Design Center and other schools in North Nashville that are below 70% capacity. Like MLK, Haynes Middle School provides a unique community-based environment and academic programs that expose students to STEM and healthcare careers, which is near and dear to my heart. These academic programs provide knowledge that inspires students to become the next generation of doctors, nurses, biomedical scientists, and other healthcare professions. As a result, this school provides each student with a stimulus that could potentially and will propel them to a successful academic career in high school and beyond as a healthcare professional. Our organization supports programs that will allow Haynes Middle School and other similar schools in North Nashville to remain open. We also support initiatives that provide funding to enhance the environment and academic rigor of all Metro Nashville schools, so that every student has the opportunity to reach their highest academic potential. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you. Greg Walker.
Good evening. It's an honor and a pleasure to address the school board this evening. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to present an option about the MLK expansion issue. I'm a parent of an MLK student and a head student. Tonight, however, I'm also speaking to you as a professor of engineering. At the college level, we concentrate math and science talent to promote learning of our engineers. This is how engineering is practiced in the real world and how our students need to be taught. The learning environment is critical to success. Mark Sanders at Virginia Tech, who is a professor and program leader of Technology Education Department, extols the virtues of what he calls integrative STEM education. Unwittingly or deliberate, MLK has been able to duplicate the immersive environment that we enjoy at Vanderbilt and that Professor Sanders describes in his research. It's not hard to see why MLK is such a successful model, which includes co-located 7th and 8th grades for training in engineering and science. We need to foster this environment, not destroy it. Although recent articles indicate that academic magnets are not a priority of Dr. Register, I nevertheless commend him for recognizing the need to build on strength and expand MLK. Expansion, however, will require detailed plans and thoughtful consideration on how to best implement the changes. The current proposal leaves too many unanswered questions. Would a third magnet serve students' needs better? Where do we put new buildings to maintain athletic space? How do we fund the expansion and deferred maintenance? Could other closed school buildings be used either temporarily or permanently? Will the council release funds to cover the expansion costs? Has a feasibility study shown that expansion will not adversely affect education? And the list goes on. Quite simply, significant changes require significant planning and time, which we have not had yet. In the meantime, we still need a stopgap measure to alleviate enrollment pressures. So let's back up and consider what all the stakeholders want. Parents want Metro to honor their promise of students being able to matriculate through the pathway to 7th and 8th grades. Dr. Register wants to maintain diversity. The school board wants immediate relief of the overcrowding problem. The council wants to save money. In reality, I could argue that all stakeholders share all of these same goals. But the important thing is that we can do all of this by making small adjustments to the pathways. The problem is that every one head student seat leads not to one, but potentially 3 MLK seats. No wonder we've been hit with overcrowding. By streamlining certain redundant pathways, the enrollment issue into MLK can be effectively controlled, can improve fairness to all students across the feeder schools, and simultaneously satisfy all of the wishes of the stakeholders. This can be implemented now, in time for next year's lottery, will cost nothing, and most importantly, we will be diversity neutral solution at worst and could conceivably enhance diversity in MLK according to the data. We also realize the following benefits.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Pastor Aileen Tolliver. Okay. Jim Kinsler.
My name's Jim Kinsler. I'm a parent of a head middle school student. I wanted to say that the timing of the proposed MLK change announcement with an original vote 28 days later felt kind of manipulative to me. There was little time to be much more than emotional at the first meetings, and I was emotional at the first meetings. I felt like my son was being robbed of a chance that he had already earned to attend what I consider the perfect school for him. I wanted him to at least have the plan delayed for 2 years so that he and the others in the pipeline could attend. But after I've had an opportunity to reflect on that, I realized it's not just about my son or the kids in that pipeline. It's about the school that's offered so much to the students and the community. And so I need support for long after those 2 years that my son would have been able to do if you had delayed 2 years and had that be part of your plan. A vote to make such a major change on a school with a legacy of academic excellence should never be done that fast. And I appreciate the fact that you've delayed that vote, that you are reconsidering other options. There is no alternative to the current MLK structure of having a 7th through 12th grade school that can replace the experience being mentored by successful older students, such as this young man who is exactly who I hope my son grows into be as a student. The exposure to excellent teachers, the academic rigor, and the length of time needed in that rigor to achieve the advanced courses that students do now. Parents seem to be, have been momentarily lulled into what I hope is not a false sense of security with the new plan that was offered to Metro Council, which I thought was, I really appreciate the fact that you've looked at other plans, other options, and you brought that, Dr. Register, to the Metro Council. My question is, if as a school board, you accept that new proposed change that was offered to Metro Council, what's the backup plan if they don't fund it? And there are so many important competing priorities for capital expenditures. How can we as parents feel assured that MLK will not lose the momentum of the new plan? I know you've got difficult times. It's always difficult finding out enough money. And MLK has got such a legacy and means so much to this community and to these students. I just hope that you will find a way to make it work. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Roy Wellington.
My name is Roy Wellington. Thank you, Madam Chairman, for this opportunity. Parents are learning that there will be no lottery this year and next for MLK. The latest proposal to expand the school onto the soccer field relies on barriers to prevent additional students entering through the Head and Rose Park pathways. You're telling parents to give it up. They may as well move to Williamson County. Metro schools will disappoint 2/3 of those who apply to MEGS, some of whom will leave Davidson County, like others have over the years, taking the mall's property taxes and sales taxes with them. Why are you doing this to Nashville? Are the academic magnets an asset or a liability to Metro schools? The academic magnets have earned a well-deserved national reputation because the students and teachers work very hard to exceed expectations. It is ridiculous to say that the hurt they put on Cluster High School overwhelms those achievements. MLK and Hume Fogg students have passing scores on over 500 AP tests apiece, each more than the balance of the district added together. The same program and another academic magnet can yield another 500+ successful AP tests. Did I say this is more than the rest of Metro high schools put together? Who would go to Metro Council with a capital budget for new schools while you're closing schools? Why would you do this? I see an opportunity to make better use of what we already have to educate students to their full potential. The list of underutilized middle and high schools has 2,500 empty spaces in the Maplewood, Whites Creek, and Stratford clusters. That's a whole empty middle school and a whole empty high school. That's an academic magnet at Gray Mar and another academic magnet at Maplewood. Have a lottery for 900 students in the first year and give last year's lottery losers another chance to enter into 6th and 8th grades. After 4 years, we would have over 400 countywide slots for 5th and 9th grade. There is so much empty space at these schools that you can plant 5 grades in the new academic magnets while current Maplewood and Gray Mar students study until graduation. Check my numbers. Disruptions to the enlarged Whites Creek and Stratford clusters are extremely minor. Empty spaces in 3 middle and 3 high schools will be filled over 4 years when everything normalizes. Increased student population starts the very first year and impacts Bailey, Jerry Baxter, Stratford, Whites Creek, and of course Gray Mar and Maplewood. Take these schools off the list of underutilized assets immediately. I'm asking the board to instruct the director to have a proposal ready by the work session on October 22nd. Tell the director to open up the lottery for 5th through 9th grades in January for a school start next August. When you bring your capital budget to Metro Council, tell them that you are using taxpayer assets to their fullest and best use, and the taxpayers will grudgingly build you your new schools. Tell the elementary students to read every night and practice their times tables because the path to the best colleges and opportunities is right there in their neighborhood. Tell the parents that they have to move to Davidson County to get the best schools and make it happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wellington. Jody Lentz. Going once, twice. Gone. No. No, that person's not on, not coming. Jen Visor.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I have a 6th grader at Head. We support the proposal to expand the capacity of MLK by building on the soccer field, and we would also like to provide some other possible solutions for consideration. 1, there should be a recertification of residency for all students in feeder schools at MLK and also lottery seat winners to be sure that everyone is living inside Davidson County. 2, a current teacher at MLK suggested the option of utilizing space in the upstairs of the new wing. 3, if funding is not available to build on the soccer field, portable classrooms can be placed there until funds are available for renovation or expansion. The use of Watkins Park or Head Fields could be considered. Currently, there are several sports at MLK which are already performed at off-campus facilities. Another idea is the possibility of leasing or purchasing adjacent parking lots and placing portable classrooms on the seniors lot. The majority of parents and teachers from MLK and HEAD are in agreement about the need for more time to make this extremely important decision. As mentioned before, there is a precedent at MNPS schools of operating above capacity. There are currently 17 schools that are operating at or above 110%. Obviously, this is not an ideal situation. However, it raises suspicion about the motivation to immediately address the issue at MLK, given the predicted capacity figures. 5, MLK could implement an academic standard for current students. In reviewing their website, it is unclear if such a policy is in place. Students are required to meet the academic standards to attend MLK, so it makes sense that they should be required to maintain a reasonable standard to remain at MLK. 6, a similar problem occurred at Meigs. The program was moved in 2001 to the former Highland Heights Middle School and moved back to the new building in 2004. Perhaps a similar vacant facility could be utilized as a temporary location. The final solution for the long term would be to address the problems with the current academic pathways. For example, students at HEAD currently have the opportunity to qualify for the 7th grade at MLK in either 5th or 6th grade. This could be reduced to just the 6th grade. At Rose Park, the pathway could be reduced to just the 8th grade. Using the most recent performance scores and grades is more indicative of a student's present abilities. Changes to the pathway should only be implemented after honoring the current pathways for 5th and 6th grades at HEAD, as well as 7th and 8th grade at Rose Park. Thank you for taking time to consider all of the options.
Thank you. Cheryl Williams.
Good evening. I'm Cheryl Williams. I have a 11th grader, a junior at MLK who came through HEAD, and I also have a 5th grader at HEAD who will be going through the program. I'd like to explain why I really strongly disagree with Dr. Register's proposal. First, I'd like to thank Dr. Register for bringing to the Metro Council the option of funding new expansion at MLK. That would be a wonderful opportunity, and we should try to get that through. However, we have no way of knowing whether or not Metro Council, in this age of budget restrictions, will be able or will be willing to do so. So instead, I would like to explain why MLK is unique and then provide some possible options that may allow us to tweak what we're doing now in a way that will help us to relieve overcrowding at MLK. No parent wants their child going to a school that's overcrowded. It decreases academic, our ability to use the academic space well for our students. So why MLK is unique? It is a highly successful, highly diverse academic magnet that allows children to go to school from 7th until 12th grade. We have no other school in Davidson County that allows that. It is very, very important, as you can see from the very articulate information given to you by our student board member, that MLK allows minorities and non-minorities alike to achieve at the very highest level. That's because they can have 5 straight years of language instruction leading to AP courses in 5 different languages, and that's not including English, so that makes it 6. We allow for 6 straight years of science instruction, which allows for very high-level instruction at MLK that you may not get at other high schools. Things like astronomy, AP physics, other types. And we do the same for math instruction. In your great wisdom, you said that every single student will have a math course every single year. Well, some of the kids at MLK, literally, we have to have a certain number of students in order to have those very, very high-level statistical and calculus type courses, and that's only available at MLK because we have a minimum number of students who are moving forward into these advanced courses. What can we do in terms of short-term solutions while we wait for either a new school, a new building, or for an expansion. My suggestion is that we stop the summer pathway entrance from Head and Rose Park into MLK. Right now, the students have two opportunities to qualify for MLK. They can qualify based on their TCAP scores, which will become PARCC scores from the year before, or they can also qualify over the summer based on the TCAP scores of that year to go into MLK. That will decrease the enrollment somewhat. The other is to increase our TCAP scores that are required for entry into MLK, as well as Hume-Fogg, back up to the advanced. I know that we are moving forward. Thank you so much.
Anton Visor.
I'm a parent of a 6th grade at Head, and I thank you for this opportunity. We support the proposal to expand the capacity of MLK by building on the soccer field. We also believe that the proposal to eliminate 7th through 8th grade at MLK should not be considered a viable option for the following reasons. Currently, there are 17 schools in the county with higher capacity rates than MLK, some reaching as high as 135%. Next year, the capacity at MLK is predicted to be 104 and then 110 in 2015. Head is currently at 109%, with no plans in capital improvement budgets for renovation or expansion. Even though operating schools over capacity is not ideal, it is obviously happening all over the district. Let's delay this decision so that we can properly study it. Parking at MLK is already a serious problem. Students have reported that they have to arrive 45 minutes early to get parking spots, and many students are parking along side streets, which is obviously a safety concern. If the 7th and 8th grades are eliminated, but current capacity is maintained with 9 through 12, how do you plan to accommodate the significant increase in student drivers? The proposal to remove 7th through 8th grades is touted as creating more opportunities for all students to attend an academic magnet high school. However, without 7th through 8th grade academic pathway, the faculty at MLK have stated repeatedly that they will not be able to maintain the current standards of excellence. This leaves only one elite path for 5 through 12 academic magnets, the MEGs through Hume-Fogg. Diversity is also a concern, with the percentage of white students at MEGs and Hume-Fogg being 62 and 65%, significantly higher than MLK's 43%. We applaud your efforts to improve school quality for all children with limited funding, yet we know it's a long and difficult road with lies ahead. MNPS has lost much of its good faith of parents and students. We ask that you and your fellow board members take the time to discuss an option that will keep the commitment you made, one that honors the tremendous sacrifices made by parents and students who have earned this pathway. If you don't find a way to do this, then you will continue to lose more of your best and brightest students, the kind of involved parents that you want on your team. The truth is that you need us and our children to help deliver the scores that you will provide necessary funding. If you break this promise you made to us, you'll drive even more families outside the county into alternative schooling options. This is a promise that we can make and keep to you.
Thank you. Before we move on to governance issues, I think it's important that we clarify a couple of things. First of all, there is no recommendation on the floor currently for closing any schools in North Nashville. That came about as a result of a Budget and Finance Committee meeting where this board asked Dr. Register for possible scenarios should a budget shortfall, in the event of a budget shortfall. One of those recommendations, one of the things that Dr. Register brought to us, and I'll let you speak to this, Dr. Register, if you choose to, was there are several scenarios that we'll need to consider should we, this coming fiscal year, look at a $60 million shortfall. Again, one of those things was the possibility of closing schools that were had a lower capacity. So I want to be very clear that this board has not requested a recommendation, and there is no proposal on the table for closing any schools in Metro Nashville. Second thing is, just as a reminder, on October 22nd, this board will have a work session, and we will discuss the MLK capacity issues. So it is open to the public, and it will be held in this room, so everyone is definitely welcome to attend that session. Dr. Register, do you have any comments on the school closing?
Yes, actually there was a specific question asked about what were the most underutilized schools in the district. And so there was a list of 10 schools that were based on our calculations to be the most underutilized schools in the district, and that's really what generated the conversation. And it was associated with what happens if we have a budget shortfall and have to make significant cuts in budget.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that everyone was clear. There is no proposal on the table to close any schools. Thank you. And we will move into governance issues. Prior to the consent agenda, Ms. Spearing has asked that item T be removed from the consent agenda. That is the recommended approval of request for a compulsory attendance waiver. Ms. Spearing, any questions or comments on that?
No,
Okay.
we'll just discuss it afterwards, yes.
Okay. Ms. Shepherd.
Consent agenda is as follows. 1A, approval of minutes, 8/2013 special meeting and 9/1013 regular meeting. B, recommended award of contract for lighting upgrades and lighting controls at various schools. Excel Energy Group, MBOE 13-014, recommended award of contract for lighting upgrades and lighting controls at various schools. Energy and Environment, MBOE 13-021, recommended award of contract for Whites Creek High School roofing project. Jolly Roofing and Contract Company, Inc., MBOE 800-787.13.1R. E, recommended award of contract for Overton High School roofing project. Jolly Roofing and Contract Company, Inc., MBOE 800-615.13.1R. F, recommended award of contract for Magruder Family Resource Center roofing project. Jolly Roofing and Contract Company, Inc., MBOE 800-284.13.1. G, recommended award of contract for Robertson Academy roofing project. Roofing Solutions and Services, Inc., MBOE 800-665.13.1R. H, recommended award of contract for miscellaneous track repairs and resurfacing at various schools. Competition Athletic Services, Inc., MBOE 13-022. I, recommended award of contract for Oliver Middle School additions and renovations. R.G. Anderson Company, Inc., MBOE 800-612.13.1. J, recommended award of roofing contract to repair hail damage at Gower Elementary School. Roofing Solutions and Services, Inc., MBOE 800-360.13.1R. K, recommend award of roofing contract to repair hail damage at Julia Green Elementary School. Roofing Solutions and Services, Inc., MBOE 800-380.13.3R. L, recommended award of roofing contract to repair hail damage at Lockland Elementary School. Roofing Solutions and Services, Inc., MBOE 800-520.13.1R. M, recommended award of roofing contract to repair hail damage at Cameron Middle School. Roofing Solutions and Services, Inc., MBOE 800-180.13.1R. N, recommended award of roofing contract to repair hail damage at Johnson School / Collier Roofing, MBOE 800-475.13.1R. O, recommended award of roofing contract to repair hail damage at Overton High School. Roofing Solutions and Services, Inc., MBOE 800-615.13.2R. P, recommended award of contract for Harris Hillman School Chiller Addition. Demand Mechanical, LLC, MBOE FGM-2013-02. Q, change order number 1 for Haywood Elementary School additions and renovations completion contract, Edwards Constructions, M-082. R, supplement number 1 for Norman Binkley Elementary School additions and renovations, Street Dixon Rick, L-2868. S, awarding of bids and contracts. 1, Blackboard, Inc. 2, CDWG. 3, CDWG. 4, Dell Marketing LP. 5, Earthwalk. 6, New Teacher Center. 7, Vanderbilt University. 8, Vanderbilt University. And U, recommended approval of legal settlement case number 3-12-120 in the amount of $45,000. Madam Chair, that concludes the consent agenda. I recommend it to be approved as read.
Is there a second? Second. Hold on, let me make sure that my mics are on. All right. Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we will review the item that was pulled from the consent agenda, recommended approval of request for compulsory attendance waiver. Ms. Spearing, you asked to have that item removed from the...
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. With the approval of this request for compulsory attendance waiver, these students will be considered dropouts.
Correct.
What has been done to help counsel them to stay in school?
Well, I wish Mr. Majors were here to talk about the specifics, but we really try to recruit and counsel students to stay in the schools. It's pretty obvious that we have a number of alternative schools that we've developed for that purpose in addressing this. You can see from the ages of the students that they're 17, all of these are 17 years old, and we actually try to recruit those who are in danger of dropping out or who are choosing to leave school for whatever reason they might have into staying and considering alternative schools. So that's done through the counseling department, the counseling offices. Dr. Steele might be able to address some of the approach that's used there. Pardon me, I'm sorry that Mr. Majors is not here to speak specifically about how Student Services engages these students too. To give you one example, our academies at Old Cockrell and Hickory Hollow and Opry Mills actually actively visit schools and talk to principals and talk to counselors to find those students who are red flagged, who are in danger of dropping out, and try to recruit them into alternative settings. We have a number, and we've been very successful with that. I can't tell you specifically what's been done for each of these, but Jay, you might want to speak to the counseling role there and how our administrators at the high school level approach this.
When a child is 17 and they want to enter into the a GED program, they have to go through this process in order to waive the compulsory attendance. And Dr. Register's representative is Henry Johnson, who's the principal at Bass Learning Center, where those students might enter the adult high school program. Or, and Henry is the designee that would bring this forward with Tony Major's department. I don't know these particular students. If that is the case, I would assume when they're waiving that compulsory attendance, it is for the adult high school or the adult GED program. The counseling department, before kids can do that, they have to go through their counselor at the school. So the counselors, it is a last resort for them to go into the GED program because they are considered a dropout when they do that for it, and we don't want that. We actually had a group of principals today with Fred and myself having this discussion with a larger team. If you'll notice, one of the students is an out-of-state student that is moving to Nashville and wants to specifically go to the GED program. That student has to go through this process in order for compulsory attendance to be waived. But they're not in our school district. So that one should not count as a dropout for us because they have not officially enrolled in the district.
So all of these students will now be enrolled in a GED program?
I would have to check one by one to make sure. Not necessarily, no. But that would be the hope. If they're not going to continue on, the adult high school or the GED program would be their options.
But you would say that you have exhausted every
I would hope so.
to try to...
Yeah, it would be school by school, but I would hope so. That's the counselor's job to do that, yes.
Thank you.
Is there a recommendation for approval of the compulsory attendance waiver?
So moved.
Second. It's been moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. And that takes us to the director's report. Dr. Register.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll ask Dr. Paul Changus to come up, and Dr. Stinson to do a presentation on the academic performance framework. I know there's been a lot of interest in the release of this report, and from board members and others. We have just this past week given the report to principals, and now we're glad to share it with you at this time. So, Dr. Changus, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. This is hot off the presses. We've been working on it for the last few weeks, and it is an update from what you saw in March to include the 2012-13 school year data. And we'll talk about the report layout and the format in just a minute. I appreciate the opportunity to come before you and go through this, and start by saying, that what we're trying to do here is to summarize a number of key measures on school performance into an overall index. And no single number can ever represent all of the important work that goes on in schools. But again, the important thing for us is that we do have to make decisions on schools, and particularly use this as an indication for planning purposes of whether things are moving in the right direction, what are our relative strengths, what are our relative needs. And it is also a starting point because there's going to be much more detailed data behind this. This is a summary across reading, language arts, mathematics, and science. We will be breaking the data down into more specifics for schools. The potential, and some of this is a repeat, this first slide from last spring, but the key uses potentially start with raising student achievement, and that includes our evaluation efforts of district initiatives, as well as looking for what's working in our schools in that process and what we can showcase for other schools. We want to support our district's accountability status. There are certain key measures that are very closely aligned with the state accountability system that impacts our district, but the state accountability system is focused primarily on district performance rather than school performance, and some of the key indicators from the state accountability system for schools only come out every 3 years, so we need to supplement that and go beyond that. But we do want to have a set of metrics, and we'll go through those in a little bit of detail that we all are hopefully comfortable with, and we have weighted those based on input from a variety of stakeholders, including our educators, and from input we had previously with the board. The fourth bullet point may be the most important. This is to inform decisions, but there's always context around these numbers that we need to utilize in making decisions. We will be looking at context variables to help tell more of the story, free reduced lunch, demographic information, mobility data as well, and there are situations where there have been population changes in school zoning and that type of thing. But the numbers are what they are based on student achievement, based on culture. We want to use those context variables to help us identify those schools that are doing extremely well for particular populations that may be struggling in other places, to help us again identify the schools that can serve as models for others. And beyond that, we'll be going into those schools to help hopefully identify specific strategies behind the results. So that being said, just as a reminder, this is heavily focused on growth or progress. About half of the model is academic progress, 30% coming from attainment, college readiness. That's our ACT scores, our projections to the ACT, the percent of students meeting high standards on our state accountability assessments. The achievement gap is only 5%, but all of our subgroups are in the data, all of the growth and progress data, and schools are not going to hit targets or come close to hitting those targets if subgroups are not moving in the right direction. And we have school culture variables, which I'll go into, but that includes currently the educator voice, the teacher voice primarily, and now the voice of students. This particular slide, I'm not going to go through every measure in detail. Tina, Dr. Stinson will be going through this as we look at the report format. But for growth and progress, we have our value-added information. We also have the achievement level increases from one year to the next. But on this slide, you will see the minimum performance measure that is required for a school to get any points in our system. And every school will have the capability of getting up to 100 points. It's a percentage of the measures that school has. But the maximum is the number that would be required to get 100% of the points, and those are extremely high targets for each of those measures. One of the important pieces of data in this table is the column labeled percent of variation due to percent free or reduced. That helps us see the relationship between these measures and socioeconomic status or free reduced lunch. And what you'll see is that our growth measures, value added and achievement level increase, generally have very small relationship to those outside factors, whereas our achievement measures, percent scoring proficient, that's a one-time measure of students meeting a standard. 73% of the variation in scores can be accounted for by free reduced lunch. The projections to the value added, projections from value added to the ACT, over 3/4 of that variation can be tied to free reduced lunch. And with the projections to the ACT, one change from last spring, previously we were only looking at 4th grade and 8th grade for elementary schools and middle schools. But some of our schools do not have an 8th grade, and we're looking at the highest grade level in those cases. It might be the 7th grade, it may be the 6th grade. But we're using the highest grade level in a school for this measure. We have the achievement gap, which is essentially the difference between our disadvantaged subgroups and district performance. Dr. Stinson will talk a little bit more about that. And then we have favorability ratings, which are essentially the agreement of our educators on the TELS survey or students on our tripod survey in terms of positive indicators of school culture. At the high school level, we have essentially the same measures, except here we have a graduation rate, and for the ACT, we have actual ACT scores 21 or higher. But again, our growth measures, very little correlation to free reduced lunch. Our one-time measures of achievement have high correlations, including that achievement gap index. I'm not going to go through each of these scales, but what you have here is the cutoffs that were used to assign different performance categories for each school. There were some slight adjustments made on a few of the individual measures as we looked at 3 years of data after the 2013 results were in. The overall composite has not changed. It takes 65% of the points, possible points, to be excelling, 55 to 65% achieving, and so forth. We also provide performance indicators. They're color-coded on what you see here, with green always representing the top category, the dark green, followed by the light green, and red on the other end. That's to help us look at relative strengths and needs of our schools and at a glance see what those might be. But these have changed very little since last spring, but we had minor shift in terms of the achievement level increase. And we did see a decline in reading scores in terms of the growth that we had experienced before, as we've talked about previously. And that leads to a little more red when we start getting into the data. The actual performance measures that you see here, just to talk about the format, you'll always find 3 years of data side by side, starting with the overall performance. And so you have 2011, 2012, 2013, the total points. And again, they're adjusted for each school so that each school can potentially go from 0 to 100. But a school has to have at least 65% of the measures to have an overall performance rating. 65% of the available measures, essentially 2/3 of those measures, or it will be shown as having insufficient data. And if any data is missing, there will be an asterisk in the column besides that status category. But Tina's going to go through the detail. But the bottom line is you've got 3 years of data side by side, 3 pages of information for each set of schools, and we're going to go through that now in more detail.
Good evening. As Dr. Changa said, I am going to go through these in more, but hopefully not excruciating detail. There's a lot of numbers behind here. Feel free to stop and ask any clarifying questions that you might have as I go through, and we have been working on this pretty feverishly, so if I slip into using 3-letter acronyms or something, please let me know that needs to be clarified. So, as Dr. Changas mentioned, 50% of the performance framework is based on growth, and that did come about as a value statement, of what we do value as a district is growth, and in talking to our educators and talking to our parents and our teachers, that's what we landed on. So there's 2 different ways we're measuring growth here. The first is Tennessee Value Added Assessment System, the TVAS score, which you're all used to seeing on the state report card website and also on the TVAS public site. Basically, in K-8, we take NCE gains for each school in reading, math, and science. Math, we are including algebra in math for those middle schools that have algebra. And we're taking an NCE gain. An NCE is a normal curve equivalent, and it's a way of thinking about a percentile. Each percentile has an equivalent normal NCE. So if you think about it as percentile gains, it'll make sense to you as you go through this. So we took a weighted mean of the NCE gains for reading, math, and science for K-8, and for high school we took Algebra 1, Algebra 2, English 1, 2, and 3, and Biology 1. Last year, in 2012, we did not have Algebra 2, English 1, or English 3, because English 3 and Algebra 2 were new tests. We only had the first year of data. So if you go back and look at what you had from 2012, it will be different because we added the scores in so that we could compute gains. So your 2012 data from last year and from now will look a little different at the high school level for that reason. Also, please do remember that 2012 was the first year those tests were operational, so the scores are not in the best shape. And they did rise pretty significantly in 2013. So, as Dr. Changas mentioned, these measures are not highly correlated, if they're correlated at all, with socioeconomic status, and that is really good. So every school can do really well here. The second measure is the mean achievement level increase, the MALI, or the MALI, and we calculate that with, again, math, reading, or science, or the algebras, Englishes, and biology. What we do is we get a mean achievement for a given year, a mean achievement level. So we take every below basic score and multiply it by 100, 200 for basic, and so on. So if you saw a mean achievement level, which you don't have in your hand right now, that's coming later, of 250, for instance, that would signify that the mean achievement level is smack dab in the middle between 200, which is basic, and 300, which is proficient. And then we expect a certain number of students or test scores to move up, and we set a target. So we are setting targets based on for schools that have the most need. So we expect that 40% of the below basic students move to basic, 30% of the basic students move to proficient, and 20% of the proficient students move to advanced, without any of the advanced students or proficient students moving backward. So we calculate that target, then we calculate how much of the target the school made. Now, those are very aggressive aspirational goals. I mean, think about a school who could move, for instance, 20% of its proficient students to advanced, or 30% from basic to proficient. So we have 1 or 2 schools a year that can do that, and the most schools can't make growth at that level or sustain that growth over years. So we do see a lot of bouncing around in this mean achievement level. A school might make fantastic growth one year, and then maintaining that growth the next year is really an accomplishment. So you will see when you look at your data that a lot of schools did change from one year to the next on this, and it's also quite possible to do well on one and not the other. So a school might have fantastic value added. They're taking their students and they're growing them in percentile points, but it might not show up that they cross the line into proficiency or cross the line into advanced. But they themselves grew, at a much faster pace than the state. So you do see sometimes that schools will do well in one and not the other. Are there any questions about these 2 measures at this time? Okay. The next biggest chunk of the framework is the achievement and college readiness. This accounts for about 30% of the framework and is highly correlated with free reduced lunch numbers. So in this sense, every school does not have a level playing field, but we do see schools beating the odds. Every single year we see some schools that do make have great measures here. So the percent proficient and advanced is the first one. We use the same subjects there, reading, math, science, and then for high school, the algebras, English classes, and biology. And it's just a simple average percent proficient and advanced across those 3 subjects that you'll see here in the first column. And again, right now we're looking at elementary and middle school. It's slightly different for high school. Then you may remember last year we have this percent proficient, the percent projected to be 21 or above on the ACT. So typically speaking, students who don't get projected to be at 21, if they follow the same course educationally, will not get there by the time they're in high school. We do actually break the odds. We have a much higher percent that hit the 21 than are projected to hit the 21. Strong value-added growth in this area at the high schools. Nevertheless, these numbers are much lower than we would like, and across the state, only about 1/3 of Tennessee students are projected to be 21 or higher on the ACT. So we took as Dr. Changas mentioned, we're taking the percent of students who are projected to 21 or above in the 8th grade for most middle schools, unless they only have a 7th grade or a 6th grade, and 4th grade. We did this in part to align the language that we're using across the district to be looking forward to the ACT and to alert schools about the potential of these students not making it. Okay, the high school ratings for achievement and college readiness. We use 3 different measures here, the first being graduation rate. What you're seeing in your draft is, in fact, still pre-appeal graduation rate data. We have not heard from the state what our actual graduation rate will be. It shouldn't be that much different, but we hope it will be higher. That's 10%, rightmost column. The actual percent, 21 or above on the ACT, is another 10% of the points in this category. And again, the percent proficient or advanced. The last piece of the framework are the achievement gap and the survey data. The achievement gap is one of the harder measures to communicate, but the basic premise of it is that it's a weighted achievement gap. So if you have the same achievement gap from school A to school B, but you have more traditionally disadvantaged students in school B, you're going to get a less favorable index. So it's coming down to the individual students in that school being well served or not. We modeled the achievement gap measure on the state's measure that they use for focus schools, but we have a key difference that you may remember from last year. The state's measure looks at an achievement gap within a school. How are the economically disadvantaged students in the school doing compared to the non-economically disadvantaged students in that school? We had a lot of schools who were relatively homogeneous, either no low SES students or all low SES students, and therefore those schools didn't have gaps because they didn't have enough students to have a gap with. So if a school was doing equally well or equally poorly with its economically disadvantaged and non-economically disadvantaged students, you wouldn't see a gap. And we found that to be a problem. So we want the economically disadvantaged students in every school to perform at the level of the economically advantaged students at the district. So that is how we are making that calculation. And it's very different looking. We had a school that ended up in focus status who had every single subgroup achieving at above the level of the state. Every subgroup, but they had a big within school gap. That's a problem for that school, but we're much more concerned with schools that have all poor students and have nobody to have a gap with and getting their achievement up. The TEL survey, as you might remember, is a school culture measure given to the teachers once a year. The state does it every other year through Race to the Top funds, and we've picked up the tab in the off years, this year being one of the off years. And we changed this measure slightly from last year. You had seen a mean level before, which was, say, strongly agree was rated as a 3 and agree was a 4. You might see a 3.5. This, we're looking at the percent of educators who are rating something positively. So the top 2 categories in a survey, like you have strongly disagree, disagree, neutral, agree, and strongly agree. It's the percent that would be agree and strongly agree to a positively phrased question that form this index. So you can sort of read it as a percentage of positive response to a survey. The tripod survey, which we talked to you about last time I was here, is new to the district. So last year's survey is used here, and that is a student survey of teaching, essentially, and it's rated in much the same way, so the percent positive. You will see we did have to adjust the scales between tiers on the tripod survey because middle schoolers are not as happy as elementary school students, and well, they shouldn't be. And we looked at both the favorability ratings and we have state NCE levels. So an NCE, again, the normal curve equivalent, to be at the 50th percentile for the state, you might need a lot lower favorability rating in middle school because they're cranky. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Dr. Changas, but we'll be here for questions.
Yeah. Overall performance information at the very beginning, as I mentioned, schools need 65% of the measures, or you're going to see insufficient data marked here. Whenever we look at school-wide data, the important thing to remember is trends over time. We all have to start somewhere in terms of performance, and as we've mentioned, these measures, some of these measures are correlated with free reduced lunch. The overall measures, a little over a third of the variation can be accounted for from free reduced lunch statistics. The reason we have those measures in there, though, are they are important. Now, the growth measures are a critical part, but we have to eventually hit high standards, and those are measures that will continue to be here, and they're a key part of our state accountability system. But again, every school potentially can get up to 100% of the points. So where do we go from here? In terms of our office and the data support, this is global information across 3 subjects in 3 years. We want to break this out, obviously, on an individual year basis, but also by subject. How are we doing in reading language arts? How are we doing in math and so forth? We also want to break it out with respect to the subgroup performance. Now, schools have a lot of that information already. What we would like to be able to do is eventually move this into our data warehouse where they can hit a button and go down from the achievement level increase information for reading, math, science combined to see all 3 subjects. And then if they want to see a particular grade level or performance for a particular subgroup, it'll be there. That information is generally there somewhere for schools, but it's not always within their grasp by hitting one computer button. So that's where we're going. There's obviously a lot of professional development around this. We've given you an overview, and this is the second time you've seen the model, but we have a lot of work to do to make sure. We've shared it with our principals on a couple of occasions. Now's the time that we sit down with school leadership teams and really go into depth, and we're actually starting that over the next few weeks. But our data coaches have started that process. We met yesterday with leadership and learning. We're already starting to ask the questions about the whys. This is the what in terms of the performance, but what's happening that's yielding these trends. And I'll also mention that this is a very, as Tina said, some of these measures are pretty volatile, and the overall performance can change significantly from year to year. And just making a little bit of improvement doesn't mean that your status is going to get better, because we have some pretty rigorous targets for growth. So even schools that have made a little bit of overall achievement gains may show up with lower total performance ratings because they didn't meet those growth targets. So that's something we're going to be working with leadership and learning. I know that we're looking at it also in terms of district initiatives and where we can provide supports and resources for schools. So with that being said, we're ready for questions.
Let me just say, you can't give us this kind of information and not expect us to go crazy. I'm looking at these things, I'm like, yes, it's data! So we'll start at this end. Any questions, Ms. Frogue? Mr. Hayes?
Can you tell us, we've got I guess a board package on our iPad, and then an exhibit that Visha just handed out.
What the difference
and
is?
they're sorted in a different way. So what is this?
Okay, I should have addressed that at the very beginning. What we gave you previously was in alphabetical order by school. We had a request to provide the information in a format that we used last spring, which has schools by 2013 performance category, and they're alphabetical within those categories. So all your excelling schools are at the top, the dark green for 2013, followed by the light green, your achieving schools, satisfactory, and so forth. Now, I'm sure you're going to want to see this in different formats and different views, but that's the difference between these two.
Thank you. I guess a question around the data, and I'd love your thoughts on this. When I look through some of the elementary and middle school data, I'll see some schools that have a relatively high proficient and advanced percentage for 12 and 13, but an ACT predictor score that is way off the mark. I'm wondering
why.
You could discuss that a little bit.
Certainly, and Dr. Stinson may want to add to that, but the bottom line is that the cut score to be proficient or advanced is generally a little bit lower. Now, we've heard, recently from national studies that Tennessee has the second highest performance standards on its tests in the country, but that cut score is still lower than what the equivalent predictor for an ACT 21 is. So we have a lot of students who are over that threshold for proficiency, which is often around the 50th percentile statewide in terms of performance, but they're not hitting the 65th percentile, which is where the state has set their predictor for ACT 21 performance. So there are a lot of students that are above the state average, but not hitting that higher standard.
I may have one in a minute, but that's it for now. Okay. Thank you. Ms. Shepherd? Ms. Kim?
This is so genius. I know you've been working around the clock. I love it. I'm with Chairwoman Mays that nothing like a good data set that's color-coded. So thank you for all your work on this. So I have a bunch of, I could go crazy on this, but I'm going to try and keep it short. Can you walk me through just one more time the difference, how you calculated year over year? The score, yeah, so I'm trying to figure out basically, like I'm big on apples to apples comparisons, not apples to oranges. And I know it's tough because to do that for all the things that you explained, but can you walk me through like a score of 31 points in 2011 is not the same as 31 points in 2013?
Are you speaking of a specific measure or the overall?
The overall, how should I think about it?
Okay, yeah, I'll make a couple of comments and then Dr. Stinson can add to that. Now, we've tried to make this as apples to apples as possible, and where we had additional assessments, as Dr. Stinson mentioned, we had additional end of course exams. So what we did was to go back to all the previous years, which was generally 1 year for Algebra 2 and in English 3, two previous years for English 1. We went back and recomputed those previous year scores using those same assessments so that they would be more comparable. But we didn't have tripod all 3 years. So there's certain measures that come in and out over time.
I think you answered my question though. So basically though, however you were calculating in 2013, you actually retroactively went back to try and thank you. You're so good. Okay, so the second question is, to your point about wild swings, I mean, some of them are just like crazy wild, you know, where, I mean, I'm not gonna, like, for example, there's one school that went from, sorry, hold on. A couple elementary schools that were high achieving just like last year and then dropped pretty precipitously in terms of total number of points. I'm not going to call them out, but you know, but in each of those instances, do we have operating hypotheses yet about what drove that?
Well, I'll say that conversation started in Leadership and Learning yesterday with their team as to what might be behind, and it varies from school to school, as I'm sure you know. But one thing I will say, that we saw that there were certain measures that are highly correlated with free reduced lunch, the achievement measures and so forth, that tend to be very stable, for better or worse. Those are the things that don't tend to be very volatile. The growth measures, the improvement measures, on the other hand, bounce around quite a bit. As Dr. Stinson mentioned, sustaining high growth is not easy. So there are some schools doing that. What we don't want to see is a seesaw effect there. We want to see steady progress maintained over time. But we also know that we have some concerns about, you know, just the performance data we saw in 2013 with regard to reading language arts scores. We saw a decline, and in fact, I've been in conversation with some other large urban districts in Tennessee that are concerned about the impact it's had on their growth measures and value-added impact. So there was a general downward trend from 2012 to 2013 because of the reading language arts lack of growth. But those conversations about what's happening in particular schools are where we're going from here. And I know that we've shared this information with federal programs. They're going to be working with schools that have been identified in target status and starting with those schools and looking at what's happening in their building. Is it a school culture issue? Is it an academic issue? But they're going to be different stories, and that's what's going to take some time to sort out.
Sure. And this is a general comment for most of my comments and my thinking is going to just what next. When you have this, and now we have 3 years worth of data and confidence then that there are established patterns, both good and bad. So you have 9 schools, I think it's 9 if I did count correctly, roughly 9 that have been excelling for at least 2 years. Again, dying to put a huge spotlight on these schools. It is so clear that they are head and shoulders above everyone else, and if we're not, aggressively gathering lessons learned from that and then spreading that out, I think we're missing something. On the flip side, right, we have a bunch of schools that have consistently shown a pattern of poor performance, and again, what next? How many more years are we going to wait? So that's one question. This might be related to Mr. Coverstone's next section, just around how to think about the whole portfolio of schools that are under our collective management. So I can wait for some of my questions to pop in that. But to the whole problem solving, it's so interesting, to your point, it's going to be highly specific to the building. I think that we're going to see some patterns emerge for the excelling schools. I really do think, certain themes are going to emerge. Great teaching, great leadership. These are going to pop. And then certain, overarching themes that will likely emerge, too, for the lowest performing schools. But on average, you're going to see, certain things are just, are bigger drivers within a school building than not. And so I have a desperate urge to see, very structured problem solving at the school level in terms of a school improvement plan, where we've gotten down to the root causes. It's okay, so we see this pattern. What do we think are the hypotheses behind that? Okay, then what's driving those? And the constant question of why is taken to the absolute end of the logical conclusion, so you know exactly the root causes. And then everything is just ruthless execution around, okay, how do you then solve for those root causes, as opposed to just blanket, okay, let's just try and apply a bunch of solutions that may or may not address the root cause. So
that's a lot of questions in there.
That's a general, I know, sorry, Jay. That's more a general statement. I just feel like this is just so complicated that unless we get to that level of structured problem solving, it seems to me it'd be very hard to lift the boat.
Let me address some of the things that we've already started doing with the data, as Dr. Changus mentioned. Last Thursday at the principals meeting at the middle and high school levels, Dr. Changus or Dr. Stinson, I don't know which one, ran the data by EOC exam and TCAP for middle school. And we gave them a list in rank order of their schools, and we asked them to study and find their areas of weakness. Then we asked them to find an area of strength of someone in another school that had positive growth in that area. Then we facilitated 3 sessions where, just impromptu, whomever they identified, let's say they identified Clint Wilson at Glencliff had strength in English 3, and all of the principals that wanted to learn his strategies spent 20 minutes with him, picking his brain, learning his strategies, asking him questions. Then we went to their second area of refinement, and it was very cool to watch that who was selected from the principals aligned with their areas of refinement, and the conversations that generically rose from that, organically rose from that conversation. It was very powerful. So the principals asked for that, and we're going to continue to do that. So that was the first look at the data in that particular format. There are several things that we're doing. We began the conversation, today's Tuesday, yesterday, with Leadership and Learning, looking at, for our first view as a team, looking at the target, the bottom schools, the target schools, and asking questions of the executive lead principals. In your opinion, what do you think is happening in that school? That was a powerful conversation that will continue. As Dr. Changus also mentioned, the external review process. Dr. McCarger's department has been working with Kelly Noser, who's an outside consultant and a researcher, on developing a process that is going to target those schools. There are 17 of them now, 8 elementary, 8 middle, and 1 high school, that we're going to target for the external review process, where we go in and we diagnose with that leadership team what's happening in that school and possible solutions, and the development of an action plan based and developed in that school by that school leadership, with us helping and supporting the schools in that process. We've also identified, using the data, 33 elementary schools that are performing low in reading, and we are targeting their coaches over the next 3 months, October, November, and December, with very specific intense training on reading strategies and working with their faculties on reading strategies. We've also identified 25 elementary and middle schools that were scored low in reading and science together, and we've begun that professional development today with their teams of teachers on the hands-on science kits, how to infuse literacy into the science. We're also targeting specific schools with reading clinics and reading recovery. Those schools have been identified using the data, and that training has begun with those faculties. I don't want to name them publicly, but I mean, I can definitely give you the list of them. Also, this school improvement plan, the alignment, Dr. McCarger's team is finished, almost finished, I don't know if she's here, with that process of aligning the school improvement plans and the templates with the strategic plan that will support exactly what you're saying, the differentiation in the schools based on their data, their strengths and weaknesses. Identifying those high-yield, high-probability strategies is the next step, and also, as you said, what we do with the data in terms of if we're seeing 3-year trends, which we are, we've identified those schools that we are seeing those 3-year drops in, then we will have the hard conversations about the leadership of that school. Those are next steps.
I do want to add that on the leadership of the school, sometimes the principal hasn't been the same for all 3 years, and
Yes.
we will be working on a principal version of this, following the principals around, sometime in our free time.
So they've done a much better, much more thorough job of talking about next steps than I'll do, but I do want to mention timing, which is really important, and the fact that this report is coming out now seems late in one respect because we're in the October of the year after, but we're also at the beginning of the planning process for next year's school improvement plans in all of our schools. And I want to commend our folks for putting together a report like this that is school-based when we do not get a report like this from the state. This is generated locally, and it feeds directly into the planning process for each school's next year's school improvement planning plan. And I think that's very significant. That feeds all the way up to your strategic plan.
Do you have any additional questions, Ms. Gann? Ms. Barron?
Yes. First of all, I just want to say thank you. This is very thorough and comprehensive review, and I found Jay's remarks about next steps so far very helpful. My question that's lingering, and you may have explained it and I just don't understand it yet, but about the achievement gap in schools that have, within the school that has a homogeneous population. Did you say that there is a standard that you're using to identify outside of the school, since there is really since it is a homogeneous population? How explain that again.
Yes, we are actually calculating success rates for each of the populations, economically disadvantaged and non-economically disadvantaged, for instance, at both the school and the district level. So in the state's method, those two groups would be compared within the school. But if they're both doing equally badly, there's no gap.
Yeah,
okay?
Right.
So we wanted to get around that. And so what we are doing is, in the calculation, is asking the economically disadvantaged at the school to meet the benchmark of the economically advantaged at the district, so that those schools will get feedback on how they are doing with those subgroups.
Right, great, thank you.
And as I think was mentioned earlier, if a school is homogeneous, the state is not including them because they don't have a comparison group. We don't think that should be the case. We think every subgroup within a school should have some kind of standard in terms of performance.
And then it is weighted so that if you have, well, if you have 10 of those students, you're going to look a little better than you do if you have 100 of those of the students that are, say, economically disadvantaged, because there's more harm being done, essentially.
So the larger the subgroup, the greater the weight. It's the larger, each student is equally weighted in this, so the larger the subgroup, the greater the impact it has on that index.
Thank you so much for bringing a way to evaluate the achievement gap in schools that are homogeneous, because I think it's easy for them to be lost.
And we would have preferred to use the state as the benchmark, but we just don't have that data, those data. And we will be releasing those success rates in a later version of this that's going to be not, it's really going to be long, but if schools and if you want to dig through, here's the success rate for this subgroup at this school, you will be able to find it. And, that we subtract the corresponding subgroup at the district level to get that gap.
And again, this is a big picture view, and as Dr. Steele mentioned, all of this should be tied to the school improvement plan. Schools should already have some ideas of the achievement gaps for their subgroups. But that level of detail is critical in order for them to address their issues.
Dr. Brennan?
Thank you.
Dr. Gentry?
A couple of questions. So I'm trying to, because I have to, because I just have to, figure out the bigger picture. So this becomes our ultimate dashboard for looking at our schools, right? That would, or is it?
Well, that's our hope, that this will, again, no single indicator is going to tell the whole story, but we think this is the most comprehensive data that we have on schools.
But understanding we can drill down behind any
Right.
of these things to get to. So, we keep, I know Amy and I at least, looking for the dashboard. So this is sort of the portal into that. How do you see, let's say, being optimistic, 2 years from now, where we've really nailed this standards-based grading process that we talked about last work session? How do you see it, the success of that, being reflected here? Where would I find that we've really got that?
Well, several of the measures should, if not most of the measures, should be indicators. We should see academic growth in terms of the percent of students meeting high standards, which would show up in our value-added scores, would show up in our mean achievement level increases, would show up in percent proficient and advanced rising. I would also hope that it narrows the achievement gap, because as I've said in that previous work session, I'm a big believer that for us to attack that achievement gap, we have to have consistent expectations for students, and I think that's one of the benefits of standards-based grading. But I would also hope that it has, and we may have conflicting views, as we heard from some of our panel today, but we may have, I would hope that it has a positive environment, influence on the environment in the school in terms of both the educator and student perception. We've got work to do, though, to help everyone understand that.
We also don't plan to change the measures every year, so conceivably we could see half of our schools in the green next year. We did go back and do some tweaking this year because we had only looked at 2012, because we knew we needed 3 years of data to do a real comprehensive look. And so we looked at the kinds of patterns we saw over 3 years. So one of Dr. Register's proposed measures in his evaluation is how many schools are moving up. I mean, this is important to us, and so we've set it up so that every school, and we hope that every school ends up being green, and then we'll reset the scale, you know.
But I'll just reemphasize that for that to happen, that growth has to be continuous year after year.
Very aggressive.
Another topic that I think we just keep getting teased with is the needs-based budgeting. And so I'm looking at him, I'm not looking at you. And I don't know where we are, and would love to, maybe not tonight, get an update on that soon, of how we're progressing to that. So does this tool become the input into that process? And you may not be able to answer that, but I guess that's what I'm looking for, is that when we start talking about soon the needs-based budgeting process, what is the instrument that is really the input into that? So, you know, again, so that we're not going to, just to kind of expand our concept of standardizing. So we're standardizing on, in this space, of how we actually look at and start to evaluate the performance of our schools. And then we're standardizing on how we're actually grading, so that an A is an A is an A. And one day we'll take the word magnet out of the name of all of our schools, because it won't really matter. And so then I'm saying, what is the standard that we look at to actually do this thing called needs-based budgeting?
And I don't, Dr. Register,
You don't
may
have an
want to
answer for
speak
that
to
now, I
that.
understand. But I'm just throwing it out there as a nice little topic for a work session soon.
Yeah, I'm underlining soon.
Yes, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any additional questions? Fantastic. Thank you so much. And we're going to kind of readjust a little bit here. Before we get into the charter schools report, which I know is going to be pretty extensive for this board, Sydney Rogers with Alignment Nashville is going to do a presentation to the board to just give an update on where we are, what we're doing with Alignment Nashville and Metro Public Schools.
Chairman Mays, and thank you, board, for this opportunity. Bisha's going to show me where my presentation is. I really hate to follow that. That was very impressive, Dr. Stinson, Dr. Changas. I've learned a lot. Thank you. Okay, I just want to give you a little bit of an overview of Alignment Nashville. Some of you are very familiar with Alignment Nashville. Some of you may not know what it is at all. So Bisha is giving you a copy of our annual report, and that is the old annual. Can everybody hear me okay? That's the annual report from 2002, 2003 is underway. All right, what is Alignment Nashville? We have been around since 2002. In 2002, the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce decided that the leadership, the business leadership, was looking at all of the issues that were going on in our schools with outside agencies, people, organizations, post-secondary, nonprofits, businesses trying to work in the schools. A lot of goodwill, a lot of good intention, but there was no overall coordination. They were all accessing the schools individually. Lots of money and goodwill being consumed, and there was basically an administrative drain. And the overall impact they considered to be negligible. Looking for a way out, looking for some way to solve this problem. I pulled this quote because we've used it for years. The problems facing our city seem to defy solution, but the only certainty is that increasingly complex challenges exceed the capabilities of any single sector, public, private, or nonprofit, to solve them alone. So we had an opportunity in 2002. And by the way, in 2002, I was over at the Nashville State Community College as an executive there. I had only been assigned to help with this as a volunteer. So there were pulled in about 100 people from around the city at that time to work on the problem. Impact on school performance, and when we talk about impact on school performance, we're not talking about the school's job, we're talking about what could be done in the community to support what the schools are doing to ensure that they are more successful. What can we do about kids' health? What can we do about kids' obesity? What can we do about tutoring? All of those things that help them be successful. We knew it could be more powerful if it was focused and coordinated. Let me clarify. Let me stop 1 second and clarify one thing. When I use the term Alignment Nashville, I am not talking about Sydney, Melissa, our staff, for those of you who know us and our staff. When I say Alignment Nashville, I am talking about the collective we. That is the schools, and you'll see how this plays out in just a moment. The schools, along with the community, working side by side in a systematic way. That's what I'm talking about. So please understand, when I say we and when I say alignment, I'm talking about the collective we, not us and our staff, not our organization. I define alignment as the whole community. So our mission is to align the community organizations and resources so that their coordinated support of Nashville's youth has a positive impact on public school success, children's health, and the success of our community as a whole. I will tell you that children's health came in after we got started. Mayor Purcell at the time was on our board, had convened a children's health summit, and after that summit identified what was wrong in our city with children's health, what we could do to improve it, and asked alignment to take that on. Because it really conflicted with a lot of the other things that we were doing, because we found that most of, in fact, a majority of the services that were being brought into the schools had to do with health. They were, if you know, you understand that the CDC defines bullying as a public health issue. That was considered a health issue. Alcohol and drug abuse, teen pregnancy, all of those are health issues. We had a lot of people in goodwill coming in to try to help with these problems. And so health was a major concern. We really like this, and usually on this screen, the top gets cut off. But each institution is autonomous and has to do its own work in the way each instrument in an orchestra plays only its own part. But there is also the score, the community, and only if each individual instrument contributes to the score is there music. Otherwise, there's only noise. And this is about the score. So this is about how do we take all of that goodwill and, with a score, create a positive collective impact. So here's a little bit of the timeline. In 2002, I told you when it started. We did all this preliminary work, and in 2004 and 5, the program was launched. Alignment was launched in the schools. I was retiring from the community college, moving to Florida, and they said, "Oh, why don't you just stay here?" And this is how I ended up where I am, standing in front of you today. And that was in 2005, 2006. You may or may not be aware of the fact that in 2005, the high school committee, and by the way, we organized 4 groups, pre-K, elementary, middle, and high school. We had about 250 organizations working with us. Our high school committee was the vehicle through which the definition of the academies occurred. The grant was written, the defining how the businesses would engage in the academies. All of that was done through the Alignment High School Committee. I have a full case study on that I can provide you. I didn't bring them, but I can provide that if you would like it. Then we launched Children's Health, and we realized we had left out all of those kids from 16 to 24 who were out of school and out of work, and we needed to add a group to look at that. Then we added Parent University. You may be familiar with Parent University. It started through the Alignment Parent University Committee. We don't have up there where the Behavioral Health Committee was. I don't have it, just ran out of room on that slide. But our Behavioral Health Committee, one of the Children's Health Committees, started with social emotional learning about 7 or 8 years ago. Got federal grants, trained all the bus drivers, the cafeteria workers on how to identify kids, defined what should be done in social emotional learning, wrote a user's guide for all of our staff, which pulled in CASEL at that point in time about 5 years ago. You all are familiar with who CASEL is. That started through that Behavioral Health Committee. And then we added Refugee and Immigrant Support Services, and Community Achieves. We began working with Dr. Register about 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, on defining Community Achieves. And this year we have launched Alignment USA. A lot of these terms that are used to define us, a collective impact organization. We are Nashville's collective impact organization for children. P20 Council, some of you may be familiar with that. Intermediary, cradle to career organization. We use to alignment of strategic goals, alignment of existing resources. One of the things that distinguishes the work of alignment is that it is very important in our principles to align the existing resources before we add new resources. This is a key component of how the work happens and how it is successful. So here is the story. If I step away from this, you won't be able to hear me.
No.
Okay. I have to do this with my hands. But this is the story that I went to 100 lunches the first year we were doing this with people all over the city and explaining what is the concept, and it's about systemic change. And it's about the story that one of our founders tells. He says, I was a good Catholic boy and I went to Catholic school. And I heard every year about Mother Teresa, and I understood she is the purest form of charity. Every day Mother Teresa goes to the ditch and gets the child out of the ditch and brings the child into the orphanage. And every day there's another child in the ditch. And she gets the child and brings the child. And he said, and I looked at her and I thought about this for years, and I realized I am not that good. I just am not that good. I can't do that. What I have to do is try to do my best to create a world where we have no children in the ditch. There's another story that the Public Health Department tells, which I can't, Dr. Kim tells it really well, and Dr. Paul and Dr. Kim chair many of our committees in the whole Children's Health Initiative. I can't tell it like she does, but basically it goes like this. You know, a whole group of people are standing on the side of the river, getting all the kids that are floating down the river and pulling them out and saving them. And so they get more and more people, and they put more and more people in the river and pull the kids out of the river. And finally somebody said, but where are the kids getting in the river? And it's about our systems. It's about systemic change. We need systemic change in our society in order to really make this work, to make the 21st century work. And what the definition of that is that we eliminate the root cause of the problem, or we change the way we work. On this slide, you see that over there, those little people, that is the individual service organizations that are working on individual interventions with children. And we have plenty of broken children, and they need to have interventions. And so coordinating those services gives us some strategic alignment, and that does give us some improvement. But if we can come up with strategies that are strategic and that are systemic, and then we can identify the resources that are going into those efforts, and then we can coordinate those as the next step. And many efforts go that far, and they may even go as far as collaborating. And collaboration, as you probably know, many of you probably know, is not the same as coordination. Then, if you go the next step and align resources, and then you can achieve systemic change. And that is what we consider several of the initiatives through alignment to have done. I'll say this, alignment is a tool set, it's not a program. Here are the tools: a set of principles, a structure, a process, and a technology. It is a system, and it is systematic, and it has been developed over the last 9 years. The technology underpins and supports those other three. One of our founders put everybody in a room and said, we're not leaving this room until we come out with agreement on what the principles are. And basically it goes like this. We bring everybody to the table, everybody's voice is heard, but we're focused on those kids that need it the most. We are targeting academics, but we are focused on the whole child to achieve that academic improvement. The work is comprehensive and multifaceted. We also have principles that we abide by in the committee work, which is that organizations who participate and work on the design teams leave their agendas at the door. And one of our founders says, leave their guns at the door. All viewpoints are heard. I'm not going to take the time to go through all of these. They're very important, though. They really are the heart of how it works. This is a really important slide. The board of directors, if you flip open that annual report that Visha handed you, on the front left cover is the board of directors. And it consists of all of the highest stakeholders in our city who have a stake in public education. That is Dr. Register, Cheryl Mays, the president of the chamber, the chairman of the chamber, the presidents of the foundations, the presidents of the colleges and universities, the CEOs of companies, the mayor. You will see that every major stakeholder is on that board. And that is the governance board. And they're not really going to do much because they're really at that level that they're not going to get their hands real dirty with actual day-to-day work, which is where the operating board comes in. The operating board meets every month, and I'm going to tell you there are 40 to 50 people on that operating board. It is unique in the country, although we have now got 6 alignment cities throughout the country modeled after Nashville. We brought 111 people here last week from 11 communities. I get multiple calls every day. From Hawaii to New York to Texas to Florida, they are creating alignment communities modeled after us, and we're providing assistance for them. This is the only place that has an operating board like that. The others are creating it. It is an action-oriented group. It is the chairs and vice chairs of all the working committees. And what it does is it serves as a peer accountability board for the whole city. So here's what happens. You get an initiative started in a city around an issue. Let's say reading, kids reading, or whatever it is. You get good, well-meaning people who work on that project, and they make good progress, but in the end, they're only accountable to themselves. This is a board that creates a cross-accountability and a cross-pollination across the entire city. It meets every month. There are usually 30 to 40 people who show up, and that's been going on for 80 years. It meets right here in this room every Thursday, every third Thursday from 8 to 9:30 a.m. 40 people show up every time. Why do they do it? They do it because there's a lot of value coming out of this. Every single time they meet, something happens because the academy's chair or the high school chair and vice chair are there, and they are talking to the school nutrition chair and vice chair, who are sending a team of people to training. And all of a sudden now you've got culinary arts students involved who are from the academies. The cross-pollination is amazing and magical every single time. And they're accountable to each other. I have combined these little blue bottom boxes because we have so many. We started with pre-K, elementary, middle, and high. Now we have those, but we also have all the children's health committees, special populations being parents, refugees, immigrants, etc. Oh, one more thing. Excuse me. Those are called design and implementation teams, and I will back up 1 second. Those school teams, design and implementation teams, pre-K, elementary, middle, and high school, are all chaired by a high-level decision maker at the school district. That's by design, because one of the main principles that I did not take time to talk about, and I should have, is that the basic premise of Alignment Nashville is that the school district's strategic plan is the law. And it's not for us in Alignment to decide what strategically to do. It's for us to take what you decide you need to have done, and we will align around that. That's why for every committee that has to do with the schools, it has to be chaired by a high-level decision maker at the school district. It has to be, because the schools are being held accountable for the results. All we can do is support you. And that's what we're here to do, 100%. And so that person sitting in that chair is the one who is bringing the agenda of the schools to bear upon the rest of the community. And if it didn't work that way, nothing would ever get done, because if you put a group of people out here and making plans for how they're going to solve some kind of problem, and it has anything to do with the schools, and there's not a decision maker from the schools there, it isn't going to happen. And it's just a waste of our time and everybody's time. And so we know that, and that's how it's designed. This process is designed by the business community, educators. It basically takes basic logic modeling from evaluation, backwards design from Wiggins and McTighe and Bransford, if any of you are familiar with them, and they were here in Nashville, or Bransford was, so you remember, you know him. Business planning, tactical planning, all of that is combined in this process. Our committees go through tactical planning. They look at all the data, all that wonderful data that our research and assessment group puts out. They look at it. They look at health data. They look at it all. They figure out how they can use the resources we have in this community to support what you do. They design a plan, and by the way, those committees are only 12 to 15 people. Any more than that, if you open up the doors and say, everybody come and help us solve this problem, and you get 100 people in the room, you think you're going to get it solved? Not likely. That's basic teaming research that tells us to do that. But then we have another problem. How do we engage the larger community? And there's another step called community engagement, which basically takes the plan that's crafted by that group and creates what's called an invitation to participate. That invitation to participate is a call out, goes out to 2,800 people on the web several times a week, because now we have these coming out all the time, and says, this is what we need. How can you help us? So now we've just completely flipped everything on its head, because in 2002, and still some today, but not as much today, in any one school building, you've got this one, this one, this one, this agency, this person knocking on the door, I can help, I can help, I can help, I can help, all meaning well, but bringing 200 agendas, bringing 20 agendas, bringing 10 agendas. Now you have a design team that is the schools sitting by high-level people from the community that can make decisions about community resources, setting out a design and saying, come help us with this. And you know what? Some really amazing things happen. First of all, many agencies and organizations have found that they don't have to change a whole lot. They only have to change a little bit to work within this system. Some have to change a whole lot. I'm not saying that that's true across the board, but I'm saying that in a lot of cases they don't have to change much at all. The most amazing thing that we didn't expect is what we call unusual suspects. Every time an invitation to participate goes out, we find out there are many, many resources in the community that can bring resources to bear on this solution that has been strategically designed that no one would have thought of. If you are sitting in your office and you're an expert in elementary school character education, and you've got a list of 12 agencies that you know deal with character education, you pick up the phone, you're not going to know who to call, right? But would you have ever called Marathon Oil to come work on character education? Probably not. No one who would be an expert in that area would have thought of that. But they had been looking for a way to work with the schools for years, and when they saw that ITP, they responded. I have literally dozens of those examples, and I will just give you that one. Well, one more. Country Music Hall of Fame has the Words and Music program. They help kids write songs. So instead of just writing random songs, now they write songs that have to do with character. So they tweaked what they did. So you have all the way from a small example, a small tweak, to a major agency who was not engaged in the schools at all. I went too fast past that. I'll just say that community engagement, piloting, then institutionalization is the last step. It has taken us, in every case, up to 3 to 5 years to go all the way through that cycle, because of the fact that what we're not doing is just coordinating. We are looking at systemic change. I'm going to flip through these real quickly because I know that you all are tired and really out of time. But we have been working so I was an IT professor for a long time until I retired and ended up doing this. But it's really important that we can capture this and that we can have a data set that tells us what's happening. And so for years, we developed a system, and it was working fine, but it was out of date. And we designed one that was really, really expensive, and we couldn't afford it. So our friends at Deloitte really helped us, and we had South American developers, and we've been working on it for about 2 years. And now there's a portal that will allow us in Nashville, and we're actually installing it all over the country, in Southern California, in New York, in Mississippi, in Florida, in Hawaii, we're installing it. They're using our portal, but it belongs to us in Nashville. And it basically will allow us to track all of the agencies that are working in the schools. We'll know at any point in time what they're doing. We'll also, I could spend a whole 2 hours just on the amazing data that we're going to have out of this system, and I won't because we don't have it. So I'll just move on. But it's called COM Coefficient, Community Coefficient, and it is context aware. It has sophisticated tagging categories, wiki conversations. It integrates project management, collaboration, and tracking, and has dashboards and all the good stuff you want. Some of the samples of collective impact, as you're well aware of the high school graduation rates. You're also well aware of the the age rise in the gang members. But in addition to the academies, which were a major contributing factor to that, the High School Committee of Alignment focused at least 1,500 young people over the course of a few years ago on staying out of gangs and being positive leaders through the Developing Community Leaders. I'll call your attention to the lower left corner, the teen pregnancy rates. Down in Nashville significantly, 25, I can't see my own numbers up there, sorry, 25.5% since 2007, which is about the time that the agencies working with alignment started addressing teen pregnancy. Now, there is a trend across the country in reduction in teen pregnancy, and we know that pregnant girls drop out of high school, right? Especially when they have their second kid. There's a trend in this direction, but it is nowhere near this big. The impact of the collective here is much greater than it could have been otherwise. So there are four things that started with alignment committees, and when I say alignment committees, I'm not talking about Sydney. I'm talking about the leadership from the schools that was chairing these committees, and the leadership from the community that were vice chairing these committees. And these are the high school transformation, parent engagement, which started, not all parent engagement, but parent university started through the Parent University Committee, the behavioral mental health, social emotional learning, and a very significant progress in pre-K, which I don't even have time to address, but some of your pre-K folks can do that for you. If anybody thinks that only the academic programs will help our end up making our kids successful, you can look at these bubbles around this Academies of Nashville, and look at, these are all, each blue bubble represents a committee that is working to help and support the academies. You could replicate this slide for middle schools, for elementary schools, for pre-K, but all of these are groups that are currently working in concert to support the schools. I have to mention school nutrition because we have made pretty significant progress in school nutrition, and Fred's sitting on the front row. Worked with him to do it. But it's important for me to just close with this, that these have been successful because we have a very defined system, principle, structure, process that has facilitated strategic thinking. It's resulted in systemic change, real transformative change. We have to do this with fidelity. As long as we do, it will be powerful. And we are on the verge of actually having the opportunity to really knock it out of the park with Community Achieves. I don't know what happened to my slides. I guess they got pulled out. I did talk about Alignment USA. Just so you know, Nashville is the center of the earth on this. We are the center of the earth. There are, as far as collective impact initiatives, I'm going to Florida. I'm helping them set this up in Central Florida, like I said, upstate New York, Jackson, Mississippi, Rockford, Illinois, Palm Springs, California, Hawaii, all over the country, and many, many, many others who are in the pipeline. I'll stop there. Thank you for the time. Answer questions if you have.
I want to say thank you, Sydney, for being here. I actually got an opportunity recently to sit in and chat with some of the visitors here to discuss Alignment Nashville from Florida, and they were extremely impressed with the model and very excited about hearing about the opportunities that we have going on in Nashville. So thank you for everything that you're doing to sort of bring that to a bigger scale. Any questions, board members?
Those trips.
Call me.
I know, they want to be board members too, yeah. You want to go to Hawaii, right?
Right. Yeah, the Hawaii trip, yeah, we're on board.
They gave us a travel budget. So.
Thank you, Sydney. Okay. Sorry, Dr. Register.
That's
you're back
quite
on.
all right. Sydney, congratulations on great work, and thank you for what you do. to add value to the school system. We appreciate your report tonight. So speaking of travel, Mr. Coverstone came in from San Diego today. So I expect the day's getting pretty long, but we're ready for your report now.
I've been looking forward to this presentation for, you don't know why at the end, you should have. Also, I was in a long meeting.
Pull your mic over.
We don't know why at the end. And the moderator said that actually if you shake your head like this, then it doesn't seem quite as long and you start to wake up and feel good. Did you get it?
How's that working?
Right. I will say a couple of serious things before I have the slides, but I do want to get to that. It's on there, so if you can get to move. I really appreciate Paul and Tina's work on the performance framework. When they started publishing this kind of information, this balanced information that compares schools to schools regardless of type in Denver, they saw schools start to ask for input. They saw schools start to go to other schools to try to find solutions and answers to the kind of questions you were talking about, and they saw the results start to rise. So, I mean, our goal is for all of our schools to be green. And I guess my goal is to do this without the slides, but I will do that. I have... You're the man. This guy is my hero. All right, thank you. I have two deeply interrelated topics to talk about, and I'll try to handle them concisely, and then we can follow up later as you have questions. They are the PMRC grant report and the charter schools report cards. Now, the first question that I already got was, what is a PMRC? So I'm going to start with that tonight. PMRC stands for Performance Management, Replication, and Closure, and this is a grant that we received in early 2012, actually, and I'll tell you a little bit about that tonight because I think that underlies what it is we're trying to do, and also is really the reason why we've been able to do as much work as we have in moving forward on quality authorizing in our charter sector. And then after that, I'll show you our annual report cards for charter schools that are based on the academic performance framework, as well as some operational and financial frameworks, and then where that leads us as kind of next steps is really the focus of this. The PMRC grant, hey Roderick, custom show. Huh? What? Custom show? The custom show. You don't want to see, I have like 800 slides in this deck, I'm pretty sure.
No, we don't. No. You would be correct.
There's a custom show right there. So on the slideshow, that pull down arrow there. Right there. No, the top one. Yeah. Awesome. All right, the Performance Management Replication and Closure Grant. This is a project that was the result of a 2010 grant application that the National Association of Charter School Authorizers presented to the U.S. Department of Education, that the U.S. Department of Education sponsors under its National Activities Grant for charter work. And the idea is to increase something in the sector of charter quality authorizing on a national scale. The National Association of Charter School Authorizers project director had intended to be here with us tonight to talk about the national significance of that grant, but had a family emergency and was not able to be with us, and so she may come at another time. The grant basically proceeded in two parts, and the first part was done by NACSA when they combed the country to find the best authorizers, the best authorizing practices anywhere in the country that had been at it since the earliest days of the charter school movement in 1992. And they dug deep with those particular authorizers, and those became their model authorizers. And they established an arsenal of policies, procedures, practices, forms, experiences, lessons learned, et cetera, from that group of model authorizers. And then they had a competitive application process for phase 2 of the grant, where they selected 4 demonstration sites. That's the part of the grant that we applied for, and we were selected to be one of the 4 demonstration sites. This is the Nashville City Paper article that talked about that in early 2012. The basic reason for this grant was based on data like this. This chart is a national representation of academic performance by charter schools. So if you look at it, you have on the right-hand side in the highest percentiles of achievement a whole lot of schools. But you also have on the left-hand side in the lowest levels of achievement a whole lot of schools. And you kind of have this U shape toward the middle. And the idea behind the grant was that we need to tackle 3 things simultaneously in order to move achievement toward the right, which is where we want it to go. So this is the national set of charter schools, and the middle sector there would be the performance management part of the equation, with strict targets that are enforceable via the contract and which are measured on common performance frameworks like the one that we talked about tonight. You can identify schools that are going in the right direction, schools that are going in the wrong direction, and also incentivize schools to form networks to become self-improving and move toward the right. That's the performance management part of the grant, and that's where things like the academic performance framework fit in. The replication part of the grant is trying to address how we take these lessons learned in schools that are doing well at the high end and have more of them and expand our capacity to do things that are working particularly well where achievement is high. And then the closure part of the grant is how do we lop off this part of the equation so that we can invest the money that's going into that direction into the high-performing sectors of the activity so that we can increase achievement for students. Because students are our only stakeholders, and increasing student opportunity is the only reason that we do any of this work that we're doing. In order to qualify for the PMRC grant, we had to go through a rigorous competitive process, including an interview process. And I don't know if Dr. Register remembers, we sat around the phone in his conference table with representatives from local charter schools, the Charter School Incubator, the State Department of Charter Schools, as well as district people who were involved, and made the case that because of our collaborative commitment to increasing achievement for students as a result of the investments that we make in charter schools, that we were particularly well suited to engage in this work. And we had to make 3 specific commitments in the application, and these commitments were easy for us to make because they were exactly the same commitments that we made when we founded the Charter Schools Office in the first place, and these are the things that have animated the decisions that we made over the last 4 years. So those commitments were to set and hold charter schools accountable to clear and measurable and attainable academic, financial, and operational performance standards, to close schools that fail to meet performance standards and targets, and to work proactively to identify and establish new high-quality charter schools to serve students. And I think if you think back on the last several years, we have done all of those things, but we've done them in conjunction with the work that's been done under this grant as well. And that's what's enabled us to be able to move forward as quickly as we have, because we've done really a lot of work in a very short amount of time, and we've positioned ourselves both by the work that we've done, as well as the charter operators that are here and the consistent expectations that this board has held to have a fairly high-performing segment of our charter schools and to move forward on those schools that are not high-performing in a timely manner. To detail all of the support that we've received as a result of being participants in this grant would take quite a while, because almost everything that we've been able to do, that Carol and I, mostly Carol, have been able to do in terms of putting policies and procedures and practices together, and training and developing people to review applications and so on, all the quality work that we've done on just 1.5 salaries has been supplemented every step of the way by the funds, the resources, both the human capital as well as the direct support that we've received under that grant. So it's a very significant part of having built the office that we've built and established ourselves to engage in the kind of authorizing that we've done. I just want to highlight a couple of outcomes off of this list that are particularly important. Our ability to analyze replication applicants was something that we didn't really know how to do at the beginning. You know, it's different when you're adding a school to your network and you're trying to stretch your capacity or demonstrate that you have the capacity to replicate maybe a high quality leader in one place because you have systems that will help you to develop a high quality leader in another place, as opposed to just finding a way to clone Kristen McGrainer. And so being able to analyze those replication applications, I think, has positioned us pretty well to make recommendations to you about which ones add to our capacity and which ones may stretch the capacity of their organizations to the breaking point. Another thing that this grant produced directly that may or may not be well known, and I want to highlight, is that it was this grant that made it possible for us to dedicate a point person exclusively to serving the families at Smiths and Craighead Middle School when we closed that school last year, to make sure that every family got called repeatedly, to make sure that they were asked and directed and supported as they tried to make choices to other schools. We couldn't have done that without this grant, and we wouldn't have had the resources to do that without this grant. And that is the kind of important work that I think is really the human side of, you know, putting it on paper and saying, well, we're going to replicate and close. Like, oh, that's hard enough, but the actual impact on families and helping families to make sure that they have a choice that's better than the school that they were in before requires that kind of hands-on commitment, and this grant has helped us to do that as well. But the centerpiece of all of this is our ability to manage performance, because without that you don't know what to replicate, you don't know what to close, and you don't know whether you're doing well or not. And so it's really been the work building the financial, organizational, and academic performance frameworks that are at the heart of the work that we're doing, and one of the reasons I'm so excited to be here at 7:40 tonight talking about this.
Us too, Alan.
Prior to this time, this is the exciting part, Ms. Mays. Prior to this time, our ability to manage financial performance in charter schools was really limited to waiting until they ran out of money. And that's what happened with Global Academy. Now we have tools that help us to early warning, signal, intervene, and work with schools. Doesn't mean they won't run out of money, but it definitely means we have some early warnings ahead of time to help call theirs and others' attention to the things that they need to do in order to stabilize their organization. With regard to operational performance, we were really limited to identifying, you know, kind of gross noncompliance with laws or threats to health and safety and civil rights of students. That was the kind of action that we proposed against Drexel about a year ago. And that is sort of, you know, again, something that's important, but not something that we have had previously the ability to track on an ongoing basis. Now we have the ability to do that on an ongoing basis year by year. And then academic performance, of course, was really the you know, challenge that we faced across the board, because as soon as your school had high growth, you said, well, we're good if we have high growth, but bad if we have low achievement. And so balancing and combining and looking at schools on an apples-to-apples comparison as much as possible and in a balanced way that takes into account those important measures that we have is at the heart of what we're doing here and what we're able to do tonight. So that's PMRC. The transition now is, given that we have this academic performance framework and these operational frameworks, what can we do, what can we see about charter? So on an annual basis, we'll be able to do 3 things with regard to our charter sector that will help us to use our academic performance framework. That's what APF means there, I apologize. The first one is to publish annual school report cards, and they will look like this. You have these in your packet, and we will publish these on the website. These will be transparent and available for people to look at in making choices about schools. On an annual basis in October, we'll be able to bring these to you now, thanks to the work that Paul and Tina have done, as well as what Carol has done in pulling together the organizational and financial frameworks and the data that's here. I just want to step you through these cards so that you know what it is you're looking at, not in excruciating detail, nor do I want to go through every single school tonight necessarily, but this will give you an idea of what it is that you see when you look at the cards. Up in the upper left-hand corner is your basic information, contact information about the school, and so on. I direct your attention to the box at the bottom there in the profile section, just below the principal's name. This is where you can get basic information about each school, when it opened, what grade configuration it is destined to serve at full capacity, what grade configuration it is serving in the given year, and the number of students that are enrolled. So those are some of the basic questions that people have, especially as schools are opening up. On the right-hand side, in the demographics box, it's very simply a breakdown of the demographics enrollment, both racial as well as economically disadvantaged students, English learners, and students with disabilities. Those numbers are carried back as far as we have the data for the school. So you can see for this card here, which happens to be KIP's card, because they've been around the longest, they have a full set of data. For reports that do not have a full set of data, either because the school wasn't open or because we didn't have that framework in previous years, you'll see that represented in a dark gray, and so that's what is kind of blacked out on each section. You can see that here with organizational performance. You have the nuts and bolts details of the organizational performance framework in the manual that was attached in your packet, but each of those components is reviewed annually. Carol keeps track of that. It goes to every school, does site visits at every school according to that framework, and reports on that framework every year in January or February. So the data for 2011-12 is reflective of the 2011-12 school year and was collected in January 2012. Likewise, 2012-13, this most recent year's data. And the far right column on all of these measures corresponds to the data that you saw tonight in terms of academic performance for the school year just completed. Left here would be the academic performance framework. This is representative of this is drawn directly from the report that you received, and so just using the colors to indicate the different breakpoints within each of those categories. We'll probably change the words up a little bit there. Teacher surveys is what it was when it was only the teacher survey, the TEL survey, but now as that becomes a culture measure, we'll change that up. But that is your year-by-year results as far as the school is concerned, and those are rolled up at the bottom to that overall performance category representation that Paul and Tina explored earlier. The satisfactory component on here, we've changed to gray from white because we have some areas where white means that there's no data. And so just so that you understand that, I've included that key on each of the reports that you have. But if you're looking at this particular example, it was a satisfactory rating overall in 2010-11 and then excelling in the next 2 years. Down in the left-hand corner is the financial performance framework. Again, you have all the details in your packets, but these are calculations that were developed by accountants that are run with input from the annual audits that we receive from each charter school. And because the audits are received on an annual basis, we won't really receive the audits for the last school year until December, end of year. And so this piece of data will always lag a little bit, even though we'll be able to work with the schools as soon as that data is available each year, and we'll plug it into the report cards, and that'll be transparent as soon as that data is available every year, so that we'll also be able to talk about how they're doing in terms of both short-term and long-term financial performance calculations. And then finally, the diversity section, which is drawn directly from our diversity plan and uses the measures that are in Dr. Stevens' plan that you adopted. Those measures, there's an error on this particular sample, but it doesn't appear on the packet card, will tell you where they stand in terms of those measures that are in the board-adopted diversity plan with regard to racial diversity and also diversity of students with disabilities, English learners, and economically disadvantaged students. This is just the student component of the diversity plan, even though there is a faculty component. We haven't figured out exactly how to measure that or put that on here yet, but we'll work with that as we work on implementation of that measure for all of our district schools. It will proceed alongside that. Now, this is probably, in some ways, the most important part. Across the top, we will be able to do on an annual basis, we'll be able to make a prediction, a projection. We'll be able to give the schools a clear and transparent look at, if renewal were held today, what category of renewal would you likely be in? Remember, the schools have to renew every 10 years, and I'm going to talk about how we'll use this to inform renewal decisions in just a second. But every single school report has something like this across the top, and we'll be able to deliver those to you. That's predictable for the schools, and in the situation where we have to close a school, we will have already given transparent notification that we're headed in that direction over the course of these reports in each of the 10 years of any charter school contract. So it's a really predictable and consistent way of reporting what our decisions would be, you know, where our categories would fall if renewal were held today. And then on the right there, you see the details of when renewal happens, and you can see that KIPP will be up for renewal this year, and we'll talk about that in just a second. The second thing that we'll use then is use the APF for is to shape the renewal process. I just want to spend a second on this to show you what I'm talking about here. On the left-hand side, you have the 5 status categories. Our goal is for schools to be in the green categories. For schools that are in the green categories, obviously we'll take no action year to year. That's what the first column tells you. And when it comes time for renewal for schools that are in the green categories, we would like to recommend a simple renewal. Now, it's probably not that simple, but it is more simple than kind of trying to correct problems, a major school improvement overhaul. A simple renewal for a school that's performing on this framework would simply be updating the budget, extrapolating that forward, extending the plan, letting us know major changes and departures and things that have changed. So we'll put together a simple is the best word I can use for it, renewal application that will serve schools that are in this category when it comes time for their renewal year, and that will make them, you know, much more streamlined in terms of being ready to continue without having to be disrupted during the renewal process. For schools that are in the satisfactory category, as we've said, you know, our goal is for schools to be above that. And so schools that are in the satisfactory category will be the schools where we will fully review whether or not they should be renewed. There is no presumption that a school would be renewed, but that school should be renewed only if it has the capacity to deliver on its commitments, it has the corrections necessary to improve its performance going forward, and that we have a need for it in the district. Those things will go into a full renewal review. There is a full renewal application, and this will be a more involved process than the simple renewal process will be, and it'll be one that probably will come out different ways for different schools at different times based on the context and how they respond to those challenges and then the decisions that the board makes with regard to resources and everything else. In the yellow category, and the other thing about this timeline is that schools that are in satisfactory, we're not going to, you know, reach into their contract and close them down. They're satisfactory schools, they're moving along. But again, if our goal is to get better than that, you know, if you're satisfactory a couple years in a row, then we want to start asking questions about that and moving in the direction of maybe taking some actions or driving some school improvement actions through our performance management system as well over a couple of years. But it's not an immediate thing. It's something that, you know, you'd be on the lookout for. Point is to incentivize the school to take actions to improve its status on their own. In the yellow category, these are schools that are review schools. We would be looking at those schools for a one-year action. You know, if you're yellow 1 year, okay, but you know, if you sustain that over time, then we're probably going to recommend some action sooner in terms of academic performance changes. With regard to the yellow status, if you come up for review, we're not likely to review a school like that, renew a school like that, but they would go through a full renewal application. There would probably be some need for some significant restructuring, and before we would consider recommending a renewal for a school that was in review status at the time of renewal, which means, you know, their 3-year composite is really second to the bottom in terms of categories. We would not probably presume that that school would be renewed without some significant changes, which we could point to and which we had reason to believe would drive the school to the highest levels of achievement rather than continuing to remain mired in struggling along. Lastly, for schools that have 3 years of target status, we, from this point forward, will now be able to implement a policy based on this 3 years of data that we can recommend closure for those schools. The law gives us the authority to close based on academic performance, but the only detailed or specific basis for academic performance measurements that we had previously was the priority list. This will enable us to use our academic performance framework to identify schools with 3 years of this status and to recommend their closure before the end of the term of their contract. And certainly any school that has a 3-year track record going into renewal of being in the red, I don't think there's any real reason for us to even really recommend seriously considering to renew a school like that. That's the charter bargain, and that's the way that you're going to move the performance of schools from the left side of that graph to the right side, and that's really the management system that this enables us to put in place. Last thing. On an annual basis and related to that basic framework, we will be able to offer you recommendations in October. And so what I've put together here is a real simple rundown that shows the schools in the left-hand column, shows their current status, the 2012-13 school year status, and then where we have 3 years of data shows what their 3-year average status would be. The 3-year average would be the one that we would work from. And you can see that we have a host of schools in the middle that have completed 2 years and will have a 3rd year status next year, and we'll begin to see some real normalization to this chart and the ability to make recommendations as we go forward. On the far right-hand column would be the recommendations that we would have for these schools. At the top, I've already mentioned that because of KIPP's 3-year status, that we should pursue a simple renewal review for them since this is their renewal year. For those schools with the 3-year status as satisfactory, the 2 lead schools, New Vision, we would recommend no action this year, but we would be looking for those schools to improve over the next couple of years. For the schools in the middle that have 2 years of data, there are different categories there. But we'll see where that produces results in the 3rd year and make recommendations then. At the present time, there's no reason to recommend any changes with regard to Liberty Collegiate or STEM Prep or Nashville Prep or Knowledge Academy. All of those schools don't have 3 years of data, and I would encourage you, as you look at the framework anyway, to be cognizant of schools that have made changes in leadership or changes in direction, or in this case, new contracts to have 3 years in order to compile data and compile a track record, but not to go on to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years if that improvement isn't forthcoming. With regard to the schools that have significant deficiencies, our recommendation this year will be that with Drexel Academy, which has 2 years, both of those years in the target status on academic performance, that they be notified formally, and we will notify them formally as early as tomorrow, that if their academic performance framework results do not change drastically, and that doesn't mean moving to yellow, that means moving to upper whites or greens by this time next year, that we will be in front of you recommending that we revoke their charter at this time next year, effective at the end of the following school year, as we did last year. Likewise, Smithson Craighead Academy, the elementary school, has a 3-year target status, and we would make the same notification that their performance also has to increase dramatically, or we will be recommending revocation at this meeting in October of next year to take effect at the end of the school year. We feel like this gives ample time for there to be change. We feel like it gives ample opportunity for the school to make corrections. I think in both cases, those schools have already taken that seriously and are making changes. We will wait and see what those results are and be in a position, I think, to plan, prepare, and think ahead about any of those tough decisions that have to be made. The only other school there that is in the red is Boys Prep. It's only been open 1 year. It's in its 2nd year now. We have significant concerns about that school beyond just its academic performance in the 1st year that include how it has performed on both its operational review and its financial status. And so we're watching it closely. And I think that it is conceivable that even after just a 2nd year of substandard performance in all of those arenas, that at this meeting next year we could be in a position of recommending revocation for that school as well. And so that's why you see we think it's important to notify the school personnel formally now, so that if we have to take those kinds of actions, we can do so, and also so that they can begin to make realistic decisions about what it is they need to do in order to be successful. They know very clearly what the measures measures are. They can dig deep into the measures and the data that you've seen tonight, and they can certainly work with other schools and create other opportunities for learning that will help them to be successful, and we encourage them to do that. That would be the outcome that we want. But we also need to be in a position to take action on these schools if they do not make those changes, because that's the deal. And as hard and as unfortunate as that is, every time we talk about it, it's the students who are affected that we are most concerned about, and they're the ones that we're doing all of this for. And so we need to make sure that students have maximum opportunity to succeed, and that's why we invest in charter schools and hold them accountable this way. Okay, I think that's it. I've done my best. I appreciate your forbearance. I will entertain questions and/or punt to a work session.
Dr. Gentry.
So my question is great. The dashboard that we're looking at here, is this something that's going to be on your website, easily accessible by the public, trying to get ahead of the very emotional moment we had? And if the answer to that is yes, can we expand it just for ease of reading so that it actually shows to 2012 status to 2011 status?
Well, so I was going to say these will be on our website, and at the top it tells where they are on that. That's why the top is so important.
Sure.
And all the detail and data is there.
Okay.
I hadn't really, this was really a synopsis for your purposes, but I'm going to put the more the better. So
Okay.
I'll look into figuring out if there's a good
So
way.
maybe if it's this is where they go and click on the school and get
That's
to
a good
that.
idea. That's I'm going to have to have Roderick help me with that, that's for sure. Yeah, if you have some other thoughts like that about what would make this more accessible, please send them to me.
Yeah, because I'm just trying to get ahead of.
It will always be emotional, no matter how predictable we are, but that's what we want to do. So yeah, any suggestions like that I would appreciate.
Dr. Brennan? Ms. Beamer?
Was related to the waivers earlier. So one child from Smithson-Craighead, 17 years old. What school was he in?
To the waivers, right, right.
Agenda.
I think a reference was made to a 17-year-old student at Smithson-Craighead.
No, was there?
But he's 17, that's not the point.
Right, yeah.
Shut it down, shut it down. Talk about it later. Shut it down.
But, I mean,
We will
we
find
just now
out.
taking care of that?
I was reading off the list, so we'll find out.
Thank you for your
Ms. Perry?
Yeah, this may be too early to ask this question, but it's on my mind, so I'm going to put it out for you. Smithson-Craighead opened in 2003, and the scores don't look so good. And I guess I'm trying to understand why we would wait till 2014 to take action.
We have the wherewithal to, at the next meeting, move to close that school. However, the legal basis for deciding and defining our academic measures that we would take that action for are bound up in this, and we're just now introducing that policy formally. Now, we've been talking about it. It would come as no surprise. We'd probably be upheld if that came to court. But I think that it's worthwhile for us to do this in an orderly fashion, not to rush the question. Certainly, they're not anticipating that that's what would happen this year. And instead to say very clearly tomorrow morning in a formal letter, hey, this is going to happen next year if these are the numbers that we see. We think that that's the kind of transparency and predictability that you should have anytime you close a school.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that I think it needs to close tomorrow, but I would hate for us to wait until October of 2014 and then say it's going to close at the end of that school year. And we've got 236 kids that have had not only this year, but yet another year to to be in conditions where they're not.
Yeah, I understand and
opportunities.
share that perspective. I just think that policy-wise and predictability-wise and transparency-wise, that would be a short-term decision that would probably not be in the best long-term interests of what we're trying to do overall or the students who are involved. Now, if I didn't know that they were also taking actions and didn't know that the three measures were showing some improvement side by side, I would be more urgently concerned, and that's where a situation that I thought was going in the other direction based on the data and based on what we know might lend a little more urgency. But I can tell you this, now that we have this policy in place, if we get to a third year of review target status, 3-year status of review target for school, we will recommend that school not continue regardless of how long it's been open, and we won't delay any further. And in this case, if that school is not performing in the upper half of the performance measures, we will recommend at this point next year that happen during that school year. So.
Hold on. Are you done?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Hayes.
Just going to clarify.
Okay.
I want to make sure I understand the same question. It's accurate to say that the state, under their performance metrics, doesn't deem Smith and Craighead Academy as one that we could close, but under our more rigorous standards, if these are adopted, then next year we could. Is that?
It's just a lot clearer. The law says that if you're on the priority list, you can be closed. Well, they're not going to run the priority list for a couple of years, and so they weren't on, so they're not on the priority list. So there you go. Okay, so they don't meet that target. The law also says that we, as the authorizers, may close schools for academic underperformance. What we have not done until this point is formally define academic underperformance. Now, we've, certainly we've signaled, we've had this out for, et cetera, but to have that legal basis by which to link to that piece of the law, certainly we would rather have that.
Last October, they were not on the state's priority list.
Right.
We didn't have legal standing.
For the elementary school, the middle school was. Right. That was the difference, yes.
You understand that? Because I was a little gray. I wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Ms. Kim?
So I share your enthusiasm for this for a lot of reasons. One, because it's transparent, which is my favorite adjective. And it's clear, it's logical, it's reasonable. And I think the average, like anyone, can actually get their heads around this. So it's great. And thirdly, it's aligned with our ambitions, in terms of where we're trying to go by 2018, and it's setting a very high bar, and which we have to have if we have any chance of hitting the 2018 goals. And it's aligned with the strategic plan, is this alignment across what we're trying to do. But most of all, it's kid focus, because we're saying we're not going to tolerate low performance. Kids are at stake here. We have to get serious. So I love it. So the question for me is, why doesn't this govern the entire portfolio of schools that we manage? So the average kid, so there's 13 schools that are, for 3 years, have either been in target or review status, a couple of which are these, as we can see, but a lot of which are not. And the average parent is not thinking, this should apply only to charters, or this only to magnets, or this only to traditional. They're just thinking, are my kids learning? And so I think that's the big strategy question for us, is just, it feels funny to me that we're holding a certain bar for one segment of schools when it's all the same in terms of academics and what we want for our kids. And legal designation, to me, is meaningless. It's about achievement, it's about the 2018 goal, it's about what we set forth for ourselves and the strategic plan to get there. And so it does strike me as very odd that we wouldn't apply this across all 150. So that's one thought. And then the other way is to, what I love about this and what I loved about the APF presentation earlier is that we just keep inching closer and closer and closer, I think, to more transparency, more alignment about what we care about, more clarity about what we care about. And my dream is to see all of it linked up in the way that I just said, is that if we think it's worth it to use this process to govern charter schools, then I think it's worth it to use it to govern everything. So that's one thought. The other thing too is just tying it very explicitly to numbers. So roughly this year in 2013, it's like roughly 4,500 kids who are sitting in excelling schools. So it's like maybe 5% of our overall population. And so when we think about the opportunities that we have to that's what we should think of as just raw numbers as well, because that can get lost in all of this. So we think, okay, we've got 5%, how do we get to 10% next year? Not just in charters. I mean, charters is a small segment. At the end of the day, it's like the full totality of our schools, how do we actually double the percentage in 1 year? Like that would be an interesting question, because that's what it is, it's 4,500 kids in excelling seats. And then tying that to what Dr. Gentry was saying in terms of resource allocation. Like you could tie everything together then, like all these metrics then, which is unified across an entire portfolio of schools. It's not relegated to one sector or this sector or this sector. Then you can actually really have a conversation about budget priorities and student-based funding and optimizing for resources, but really what we're optimizing for then is student achievement, period, regardless of legal designation of the school. So anyway. I know some of this is beyond your, I'm not trying, but.
Well, yeah, I would say one thing, I mean, that's where all of the things we're trying to do are aligned. And so I appreciate your seeing that, and probably that's the answer to the question, why am I enthusiastic about having gotten to this point, where we can sort of see what it looks like in managing a portfolio of schools like the charter portfolio. The other pieces of that are, though, to make sure that we are cognizant of protecting schools to have the chance to improve. So if you change a principal, don't change the principal again the next year, don't convert it the next year, give them 3 years. You know, that sort of 3-year chunk of time to actually move forward and demonstrate is what goes with transparency to give predictability. And without transparency and predictability, you don't have motivation and opportunity. And you need both of those things at the same time. So while what you said is, I'm very interested in all of that, I also have a breath of caution on implementation, that we don't wake up tomorrow morning and read erroneously in some newspaper in town that, you know, hey, we're closing all the red schools. I don't want to read that any more than I want to read anything else about this, because that wouldn't be, that's not what we're about.
The same bar.
Yeah.
That's all I'm talking about, which is a fair bar. It's clear, it's transparent. There is a lead time. Everyone knows the rules of the game, so to speak.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, I'm not saying apply a different bar or, yeah, closing everything overnight. The same way we're not recommending that even for these schools that have been target for 3 years in the charter sector. Yeah. But it's just, what I'm saying, though, is same bar across everything. Same rules of the game, same approach, same transparency, same timeline. That's what I'm getting at.
And I'll get back to you, Ms. Shepherd.
Thank you, Dr. Coverstone. I have to agree. I do like the synopsis one as well as the one that goes into detail. I will say that patience has never been, in my skill set. And I keep hearing complaints. I keep getting communication pieces from primarily Drexel. And so, why, to echo Ms. Baring's remarks, why would we wait for 2 more school years to go by? I don't know why we wait 3 years. I mean, if what you said was true, that we review the data annually and we see, trouble on the outset, they make a few cosmetic changes. I'm sorry, 1 year, and I've said this before, 1 year in the life of a school life of a child is a very long time and almost impossible to recoup.
Well, I'm with you. I mean, I grind my teeth, but these are contracts, and we have to, we have legal obligations, and we have to step through those. And as I said, I think we do not want to be in a position of being the office that just hounds somebody to death and doesn't give them a chance to succeed. Got to give people a chance to succeed. Now, having said that, the operational review that we applied to Drexel last year and brought to you is still at this point exceeds the level of what we're seeing in all of that kind of complaint work. We continue to document, we continue to monitor, we continue to investigate, and if we have threats to the health and safety that, and so on, then we will bring those on the operational side. On the academic achievement side, most of the actionable decisions in academic data are done on 3 years. With four-year tiers in our schools, 3 years makes sense. You have substantial turnover of students during that time, and you should see improvements. But year-to-year variations, because of cohort changes in the schools and so on, shouldn't be reason for a fast trigger. And so it makes sense to hold that same standard for all schools of 3 years when it comes to academics. And so we kind of separate those two. The things that you and we are hearing are operational side issues, and they have one standard. The academic issues have another. If there's operational danger or if there's financial collapse, those things would shorten the time frame on our recommendations dramatically. We could be here at any point on those.
Thank you.
Mr. Hayes.
I wanted to ask two quick questions. First, on the sustainability indicators 2D, debt service coverage ratio. 1.1. Who came up with 1.1?
The accountant. Yeah, so through the performance management replication and closure grant, we had a guy who is an expert in charter school finances who helped to establish that framework. I didn't come up with that specifically. You don't like that number?
A NASA accountant.
NACSA hired contracted with this person.
At least in the real estate world, I could never get a loan for any sort of project with less than a 1.2, usually like a 1.4 today. So a 1.1 as a banker would cause me concern. And when I used to be a banker, not anymore, but I looked at that and I thought, wow, that's an aggressive and friendly debt service coverage ratio of 1.1 and might not be a true indicator of financial health.
Well, I mean, demonstrating a better grasp of that, obviously, than I have at that level of detail, I would, I'm open to that kind of feedback too. If you want to dig through, I'd love to question that further, get some more information. I suspect that it is partly based on that and not really based on the loan side of things, but rather based on what is the experience of charter school operators nationally that have been able to survive and grow versus those that haven't. That drives that analysis at the margin, but I'd like to dig into it more. Yeah, if you have any suspicions like that, I'd like to know.
More time with that document. It was a number that quickly jumped out at me. And then throughout the evening, we talked a lot about growth. And I'm curious, in our March 2012 retreat, you had a slide that showed ways that we can increase diversity. And you talked about magnet schools and charter schools. And you talked about the fact that the district used magnets as tools to promote diversity. And if we apply just a direct diversity measure, right, that we see here in red or green or yellow, I wonder, does that show if a school is becoming more diverse? And do we value that? And I feel that if we don't capture that, particularly under the legislative environment when the first batch of schools, and I don't know how many were early and required to be in low-income, high-poverty areas, but I don't know that we accurately capture, and I don't have a sense on how we're doing either, right? Do you have a sense on how are the schools that have been open longest becoming more diverse because they've been excelling, or for some reason becoming more diverse, or what are you seeing?
Okay, I have a lot of answers to that. You got an hour?
No.
Hour and a half? No, I'll shorten it this way. I mean, you're right. That measure doesn't capture the trends. We're looking at the trend data, and the diversity plan has implementation processes that are underway that are evaluating value toward more diversity in all schools, regardless of type. So that'll be an integrated approach that'll be linked to this. So that's one kind of broad overview. I don't have a general I mean, I'd be anecdotal. I could say yes here, no there, et cetera, in terms of whether they're moving more in that direction or not. So I won't bother to drop a bunch of anecdotes that essentially cancel each other out. We need to look at the data. We need to analyze that on an annual basis and make decisions. I will say, however, that the diversity plan component of the application process has become more formalized as a result of the board-adopted diversity plan, and that will give us strategies and targets to evaluate from the outset, coupled with specific measures with which to hold accountable as we go forward. For now, we're operating on the assumption that diversity is a powerful outcome that's important to see in schools. We have expressed as an organization, you have expressed the desire to see that increase and the expectation that that will increase in our charter schools as well as our non-charter schools. And by publishing that information and holding people accountable for it, we hope to see movement in that direction. Also hope to see new ideas about how to encourage diversity that will be both school-based as well as ideas that we will come up with as we think about implementing and carrying forward that will make use of our choice schools to advance that goal.
Is there a way to show in this one-page dashboard growth versus absolute? And would you recommend that? Because a lot of our charters on an absolute basis aren't, right? They're not terribly diverse schools. But they, over a 5 or 10 year period, they may, if you remember the graph you showed.
The answer is yes. I mean, the demographic data is all there in the upper right-hand corner. So if you look at that, you can see what the year-to-year changes in the rates are. You know what the measures are. I mean, if you have a 69 and a 30 or 20-20-20 on the racial side, then you qualify. If you're within 2/3 of the district tier average for students with disabilities, English learners, or economically disadvantaged students, then you qualify. And you got to be it's in the plan. And so you can sort of eyeball it that way and then see the threshold measures down below. I mean, we can look at whether it makes sense to add more to that. I don't think there's a real good reason to measure year-over-year growth with some kind of value add. I don't think that's appropriate for that measure, but I could be wrong over time.
It'd be pretty easy to add columns, though, and do a 3-year running average, just like we do with the academic performance framework.
And with a
on this dashboard.
With a magnet school, and when we talk about that, how do we measure our magnets on increasing diversity?
We look at in the diversity plan, we look at the magnet schools just like we look at all other schools. We have benchmarks that we measure against.
Pull your mic.
Would it typically be a 3-year timeline? Thank you.
In the diversity plan, it's basically a beginning year and then a measure that way. What we're doing is measuring the number of schools that meet the criteria at this point in time.
One more feature of that report card is down in the right. I didn't mention it. The lower right-hand corner. It says other data, and right now we just have attendance in there. But our goal with that is over time to, if we have an attrition figure or some other measures that we settle on, to start to put those measures in there first as a way of just introducing, hey, here's some information that we have consistently across the schools, and let's see if it tells us anything, and then maybe over time it becomes another measure, but that's just other information that we'll use as sort of a prototype experimental basis as we have. So, if sometime that emerges, it would give us a way to track that for a couple years before we made any, kind of firm decisions.
Thank you. This is a fabulous discussion, but at 8:30 we're leaving. Ms. Frobe, do you have any questions?
So I got a comment and then 2 quick questions. I think, first of all, I just want to say I'm ideologically opposed to some of the discussion that we've had tonight because always taking into account student populations, which, we all know has an impact on how well the school performs. And so I think that's something that we need to, I'm sorry, I'm tired, but I think that's something we need to take into account if we're really looking at what, how a school is doing, is what challenges are they facing with the student population that they're serving. And I think the other danger is that what I've started calling it is a Walmartization of education. Like, I don't want us to get in a position where we are just opening and closing schools at will, and parents are running around all competing for whatever they think is the best school, and then we open this one, we close this one, open this one, close this, because I think it's very damaging to students. I think it's damaging to communities, and I want to make sure that we are really giving schools the supports they need. I think schools can't do it all by themselves, and that's why I think it's really important that we stay active at the state level, because we need a lot of outside supports, wraparound services and things for schools to do well. And then the other thing that I just want to say is, if we're talking about what is a good school and a bad school, I think we're talking about data, and data can be flawed. It can be politically manipulated. I think TCAPs, we've talked about being the state being able to change proficiency levels even after the tests are given. I read a really damning article on TVOS recently about that has come as it's excerpted from a book from a local professor and his educator wife that just has a lot of criticism of the TVOS model. So I think that's all flawed, and I think we are starting to try to really look at the bigger picture of what makes a good school. That's why I love the framework that we've come up with, because we're trying to take out, we're looking at a lot of different measures to figure out, and I think that's what you're trying to do too with the charters. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to say about that. I think that's my comment on the overall, creating this portfolio where we're just, willing to close schools quickly, because what does a good school mean? And so along those lines, here are my two questions. So if we're looking at in honoring our goal of educating the whole child, one thing I would be interested in seeing, and this may not be the right format, because I recognize that this is an academic framework that you are using to target schools that are not achieving academically. I'd be interested in seeing what offerings we have at the different schools. Like, for instance, at the charter schools, and I'd be interested in seeing the whole district, but at the charter schools, are they offering art or music or, some of those extras we consider extras, but I think are really critical to student success. So if that's something we could incorporate, I would love to see that. And then, what was my other comment? I'm sorry. And then this is another question. Interventions. So my understanding is that with charter schools, once they are open, part of their deal is they're not supports in place. They can reach out to other charter schools for supports, but they can't. We are not, as a district, providing supports for them because they are contract schools operating outside of our overall services for the most part. Is that right?
Yeah, we give them all the money that we would use to pay for those supports, and then they can buy them from anywhere.
Okay.
And that said, we make plenty of extra supports available when we can.
Okay.
But it is not our goal or responsibility to provide those supports for them. And this is a different way of getting supports that are different that might work. And about the academic, we're using the same academic performance framework. It's not a different academic performance framework.
Okay.
I want to be very clear about
Okay.
that. It's Paul and Tina's work. It's what it's exactly the same framework. It considers exactly the same balance of measures that we're considering for all the district schools. And I think it's really important, critically important, if we're going to get a stab at balance. And then, I agree that sometimes it can vary, and this is what I was talking with Ms. Kim about. It can seem like what we're saying is, just open and close. Nothing could be further from the truth. I stand in front of those rooms.
Right.
That is not what we're about. And that's why predictability, transparency, planning, time to succeed, but then a deadline when it's time to say you're not doing it for the students are so important. And so that's how I see all of that fitting together. But I think your remarks are right. We always have to be cognizant of that. And if we're not here for the students to succeed across the board on the emotional sides as well as the academic sides, the opportunity sides, then what are we doing?
Dr. Gentry, you had a comment?
And I think maybe between Amy and Alyssa, it's kind of come together, and hopefully it's a little clearer now. And so, Alyssa, I'm not really sure what you meant by applying the same bar, but this data here comes from this rubric here. So the bar is the same for all of the schools within the district that are educating our students. So I think the difference is how we react to those schools that are in the red. And I don't know whether you're suggesting that our response to 3 years of data here on this listing of charter schools be the same to our response of 3 years of data here. And I think that that's where the concern, and I would have the concern, because our responsibility to district schools is different than our responsibility to charter schools, because the fact that they are contracted, and they come with us under the premise that they are capable of doing something that we're not in a much shorter time frame, and they bring to bear strategies and resources that are not readily available to us, at least not on the scale with which we would need to have those and to apply those. So I don't agree that if there's a 3-year trend in a district school, our response to that should be the same as to a charter school. So I holistically disagree with that. On a more personal note, if we look at that, if we apply that model, we would find the same concern that was voiced here with, are you going to close 9 schools in North Nashville? That's exactly where we would be. If we applied the response, we would end up closing schools that are located in low SES populations without giving them the support that I believe we are responsible for providing to our district schools. And our response is pretty clear. We do reevaluate principals, reevaluate leadership. That's why we're talking about having a strategic plan that cascades down and is a reflection of a school improvement plan, so that there are definitive strategies that get applied. And even though the strategies are not the same, we hope that the end result is the same, that we improve the number of high-quality seats, either by shutting those down, making room for more charter schools, or improving the quality of education that's occurring in our district schools. So I think our response is appropriate. I think the problem that we all have around the table is that the transition from red to green is not as quick as we would like it to be. And I'm not suggesting, and I don't think anyone is suggesting or would believe, that closing down a school is going to change the rate at which that red becomes green, because the makeup of the students doesn't change. And our challenge is at the student level. It's not at the school level or necessarily at a building level. It is at the level of the individual student. The other thing that makes this more personal for me is a story that I shared with some of the ladies that left here after their public participation. And I had the experience of walking into a grocery store in North Nashville, looking for a balloon, a bouquet of balloons that said congratulations for my daughter, who won student council president at Meigs Magnet. And I was looking for balloons that said congratulations, and I couldn't find them. Went to another grocery store, same North Nashville area, not a balloon that said congratulations. I could find 10,000 balloons that said dream big, good luck, stay in the clouds, all pat on your back, but not shaking their hands, not rewarding them, saying that you can dream big here in this area, but we doubted that you're going to accomplish it, so let me not fill my shelves with balloons that say congratulations. At least that's how I took it. And that was my comment to the manager of both stores. My picture is up, I'm pretty sure. But that's the messaging, and that we have to be careful that we don't do things that reinforce that for those students, and that the least of ours that need us the most.
Amen. I'm going to give you like 30 seconds, because according to this, it's 8:27. We've got one more thing on the agenda before we go home, and you're on.
Awesome, thank you. Because I don't want this to become a discussion about closure. That's actually the very last, just to be very clear. This is why I've been so eager to have the work session about what's differentiating those charters up there who have made every reward list, they're in the green for our performance framework, et cetera. And we say, and it's, to your point, it's the same bar. I mean, I wasn't, in terms of the academic performance framework, it's the same criteria that are applied everywhere. And the populations, as we can see here, are almost 100% kids of color, almost, and very, very high low SES populations. And so when you're talking about schools, yes, that mirror that same population as KIPP or Liberty at STEM, all the question I want to force and us to confront and to answer is, why is it that the outcomes then are so different? Like, do we really believe the kids are so different? There's got to be something that we as adults can do to ensure that the KIPP, the Liberty, the STEM, all with, populations that come from low-income backgrounds, are like all the schools that mirror them are performing at the same level. And so when I say applying this framework, all I'm saying is I think there is something about those schools that it's not about the label, it's about something else that we need to force ourselves to examine. So I would posit, for example, that the autonomy that they have to make decisions at the ground level closest to the point of impact is meaningful. So they're not subject to what someone from the district is telling them. They're actually making decisions on the ground that meet their students' needs. And they have to innovate and they have to drive this cycle of continuous improvement because their survival is at stake and they know it. So the kinds of urgency that's created and the actual accountability and agency to drive change is at a wholly different level. Those school leaders feel 100% the burden of advancing their kids. And I don't mean that in a punitive way. I mean that in an inspirational, they're on fire. They're on a mission for their kids. And they know what's at stake. Even if this wasn't outlined, they all know, right? The axe could fall on their head at any given time. And again, it's not about the punitive, it's just that it's a different level of accountability and responsibility and ownership of their entire school building. And there's 1,000 other things that I would say that differentiate those schools. And so I would love to get to a point where we have that conversation, where it doesn't become sort of this binary discussion of it's about closure, it's about this. No, those are just the outpour. Those are sort of the end. Hopefully we can avoid all those horrible things. It's just more about having the fundamental conversation about what differentiates great schools that are serving high-risk populations and how do we replicate that everywhere, regardless of legal designation of the school. And so I just want to be really clear that that's really what it's about. I'm not trying to say replicate, let's go after all the red schools right now. That's the furthest from it. I'm just saying, let's apply the same, thinking about all of our schools in terms of the high bar that we hold for them. That's all I'm trying to say.
Great. Okay. That's all the questions we're going to have on this topic tonight. We will continue this in a different setting, I am sure. So, Dr. Register, I'll turn it back over to you before we go to Ms. Kim for...
Madam Chair, that concludes my report.
Sweet. Now, Ms. Kim, Director Evaluation.
It is kicked off to complete it at the December 11th meeting. And so, as you all well know, a schedule has been released, working backwards from that date to ensure that we have the proper meetings and processes to make sure that we meet that deadline.
Are you waiting on anything from board members at this point?
That's my report.
Perfect. And I will reserve my report on the CUBE conference until the next business meeting because we've been here long enough. And having said that, if there are no other business on the floor, I'm going to give it to Ms. Froh.
There being no further business, this meeting is adjourned.
We are adjourned.